Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet. I hope you're having a fantastic day or night or whatever it is that you have wherever you are on some other planet or somewhere on this world. Today, we want to talk about a very interesting things that we have specifically picked just for your entertainment. I'm terrible at this, man. Yeah, so David, what's up? How are you doing?
Yo, how you doing, man?
I am doing fantastic. I was waiting for you to ask. I was so excited. But yeah, I'm doing good. And how is everybody else doing? I hope everybody else is doing good as well.
Hey, did you hear Sneako converted? What are we gonna do now?
Oh no! Oh no! I put all my hopes in that guy.
I know. Like 6 months ago, I was like, whatever Sneako converts to, that's what I'm gonna be because he's Sneako.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. I never heard of him 6 months ago.
yeah. And I thought back then I only listened to Sneako and Andrew Tate, and Sneako only listens to Andrew Tate. So
The two,
when
the
Sneako
two
listens to
wisest
Andrew
men
Tate,
of our generation.
yeah. When
Wait,
Sneako
wait.
listens to Andrew Tate, then I listen to Sneako, so I do whatever he does.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I only learned of Sneako once he offended Muslims by mistake.
What
By
did he do?
he imitated the Muslim prayer. I think the Islamic prayer. He was going like Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, or something like that, and Muslims got really offended by that. Yeah, that was his
Yeah.
first.
So yeah, it's funny because how long ago was this? When Sneako just recently converted and stuff, and so I looked him up, and yeah, the stuff was like him. I don't know. It was creepy stuff. It was like him watching while someone bangs his girl. I don't know if it was true or not, but that's what people are saying. Something like that. It's weird. So like, wait, this your new guy? It's like every weird. They want every like weird degenerate in the world to be the new face of Islam.
That is the main point of mockery that people are currently mocking him with. Whenever he tweets something or posts something, you can see people in the comment section just make references to him watching his girlfriend get,
Is that like true, or are they just messing with him? Because that's
No, it's
like
true. It's true.
that's
It
he
is
wanted
true.
to watch his girlfriend get banged by
He
some other
did.
dude.
He did watch.
That's weird because there's all sorts of stuff that people will do that I'm not going to do, but I understand it, right? Like if someone punches someone else in the face for annoying, okay, I'm not allowed to punch someone in the face for annoying me, but I get it. I get the desire. I get the desire to do it. And then if like a dude goes around banging tons of women, like I'm not going to do that, but I at least understand it. And then there's like, hey, I want to sit in the corner while some guy bangs. It's like I don't even what. Wait, what? You want to do what? What the heck? What is
I mean,
wrong? Like there, it's like something is wrong with you. Like your brain doesn't function correctly. Like something is out of whack.
I'm not very well read on this very delicate and obviously very
Maybe we should ask Hijab. He's the
intelligent
expert on all
topic.
this weird stuff, right? With the golden showers and stuff.
Yeah.
So he's probably.
No, I don't know exactly what Sneako did and what the logistics of it were, and what exactly if he was motivated to do this, if it happened. I don't exactly know what's going on. I mean, all I know is that people make fun of that, and it's not something that I pick on. I mean, I don't care, but I know that people keep bringing it up all the time, and it is true, and that's all I know. And of course, the fact that he is out there speaking so much about degeneracy now and about having a true woman and being a real man and stuff like that, while also being that way, and while also, by the way, just a few days ago, I think 2 days ago or so, there was a footage of him having in the background of a stream that was not his live stream, having two girls on top of him who were kissing each other. And
I saw that picture when I just looked him up, like to when I'm sharing the tweet that we had made videos, and that's like the picture popping up of him watching two girls on top of him, and it's the same thing with Andrew Tate. It's Muslims. You'll occasionally see a Muslim saying, "Hey, don't do that," but it's just like it's solely for purposes of appearances. Like, hey, we don't care what you're doing off camera, just stop showing that. And that's like the minority. Everyone else is like defending him because they understand. It's like a trade-off, right? Same thing with Andrew Tate. We want Dawa access to your followers. And in exchange for that, we will defend you to the death, and you could do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I mean, Andrew Tate literally just said, I shared it on Twitter. He called himself the greatest man who's ever lived. That means greater than Jesus, greater than Muhammad. Andrew Tate is the greatest man who ever lived. I've seen messages from his followers where he's saying that Andrew Tate is to Islam what Christianity was to Judaism. It's like the upgrade. Like he's the new.
Wow.
This is awesome. I mean, this is awesome. And Muslims are cheering, and the main Dawah guys are all like his biggest fans, and it's wild stuff, man. There you go.
It is very, very interesting stuff. So here is no, this is what you just brought up. Here is Andrew Tate has once again declared himself to be the greatest man who ever lived. This means, of course, that he thinks he's greater than Muhammad. Oddly enough, as much as I despise Andrew Tate, I have to agree that he's greater than Muhammad, since everyone is. And
Yeah,
here's
so is Sneako. Sneako's is better than Muhammad.
yeah, so this is what Andrew Tate not himself tweets, but retweets what a fan of him tweets, which is, why are you so happy with yourself? What's the alternative? To be unhappy with myself, to be miserable like you? I am the greatest man who has ever lived. There is no other choice. So this is quoting Andrew Tate, whether it is an actual statement or just a placeholder. But Andrew Tate confirms this by retweeting it, and propagating the idea that he is actually the greatest man who has ever lived, which is interesting.
And the Tate, notice the Tater, someone just pointed out in the chat, and he can keep pointing out, he can keep posting pictures of himself with all these half-naked ladies around him while he's in his Daisy Dukes and nothing else, and can't criticize him because we can't lose that guy.
Yeah,
we can't lose him. He's too important to the Dawah.
Can't lose this guy. But anyway, today we want to talk about more interesting things, such as Osama bin Laden. No, we actually want to talk about we actually want to talk about Shabir Ally, who made a video about the Quran's preservation. But I quickly wanted to bring this up, which I find. I see no reports about this, and I feel like this should be more highlighted. So here is a picture of Osama bin Laden. All for those who were just born yesterday and don't know about 9/11. Osama bin Laden is the one who took responsibility for the attacks on 9/11 and many other attacks, who was at the head of Al-Qaeda, and who was at one point the most hated and searched man in the world, and who was eventually killed. But he was a main terrorist who had some really, really messed up ideas and messed up people following him. And here is his son, Omar bin Laden, who, by the way, lives in France and is an artist, who in the past was known to be kind of a hippie, liberal kind of guy. But here he is. He made a post in Arabic. I don't know if this function actually works. Oh boy, it doesn't work. Made a tweet in Arabic that is, if we go to a rough translation, history is not recorded with its supplies, except with the blood of these people, except for the stories of these people, except for the likes of these people. Remember the martyrdom of the fighter, father, the leader, Osama bin Laden. So here is his son being romantically praising his father, Osama bin Laden, who was once the greatest terrorist alive.
Is that 1.2 million? What?
1.2 million views, 5,000 likes. So there are some things to point out here. Let's be very fair about this. This guy made a tweet basically praising his father, Osama bin Laden. Lots of Muslims joined and said, may Allah bless him, may he go to paradise, and this and that. Then there were other Muslims who actually opposed and condemned this.
That said Osama bin Laden. Is that what it said?
Oh, yeah. And
that's the sort of like extremely stupid joke that cracks me up. It's like so dumb it's not funny, but that's what makes it funny. Anyway,
I know, I get it. There are some people who actually support this and also praise Osama bin Laden with him together. And there were other Muslims who were critical of what he said and said stuff like that he is responsible for the deaths of many people. Of course, he decided to hide all those comments. So there are lots of Muslims who criticize him for this, but also a lot of people who actually liked and retweet and agreed with him on this. And it's very interesting to point out that this guy, the son of Osama bin Laden, who now praises Osama bin Laden on Twitter publicly, lives in France, in the West. this is what you have. What do you think about this, David?
I think you shouldn't criticize him, because if you do, you're a racist.
Fair point. Okay, then let's move on. Then let us move on to the next topic, which is this video. So, in this video, we are going to talk about Shabir Ally, Islamic scholar, and his shocking revelations about the perfect preservation of the Quran. Do you want to briefly summarize what you know about the perfect preservation of the Quran in one sentence?
Yeah, it's all a lie. This is from Shabir Ally, and part of the reason we're going through this, I use some clips of this to respond to Sneako. Sneako's one of these. Oh, there's only one. He's using arguments from 20 years ago, but there's only one Quran perfectly preserved. Blah blah blah. And it's like, wait a minute. I thought we'd moved past that. I thought we'd already moved past that. And I played some clips of Shabir Ally and Yasser Qadi both acknowledging that there are different Qurans in different parts of the world. And it's funny because Muslims say, you see, he only used clips. He's taking them out of context. It's like, wait, when Shabir Ally and Sheikh Yasser Qadi both say in separate videos that if you go to the different parts of the world, they have different Qurans with different words and different letters and so on. What context do you think makes it? What context to their words do you think is going to still give you perfect preservation? Only one Quran, no variants anywhere in anywhere in the world and anywhere in history. What context? It's they've just been trained to say context. Whenever you say, "Hey, the Quran says fight those who do not believe in Allah," oh, but if you look at it in context, it says the opposite. No, it doesn't. Hey, the Quran here says you can have sex with a prepubescent girl. Oh, but in context, look, what context do you think makes sense of it's okay to marry and have sex with and divorce a prepubescent girl? What's the context that you think makes that what you think it means? So anyway, that's the situation, is they say, you just played some clips, but in context, Shabir Ally is obviously going to be defending only one Quran, perfectly preserved, right down to the letter. No, that's not Shabir's position. Shabir's position is the Quran has been well preserved. It's been accurately preserved, but this perfect preservation, he says, scholars know that's a lie. So what your average Muslim believes, according to Shabir Ally, Yasser Qadi, all these guys, is a lie. According to any actual expert in the world, the average Muslim believes a lie, and that's what we're trying to get across.
Yeah, but Yasser Qadi also pointed out that this is not something that you want to say to the public, right? You shouldn't be publicly talking about these things because you will just spread doubt among Muslims. So,
but by the way, isn't that interesting? It's like, wait a minute, if you think the average Muslim believes something that's false, why don't you correct them right now? That's what Muhammad Hijab was giving him an opportunity to do. That was the opportunity. If you want to explain what the correct position is, do that. And his response is, I cannot talk about this here. I cannot talk about this here. So it's like, what do you think about this? He knows your average Muslim believes perfect preservation, and he doesn't want to destroy that confidence. And he's saying, hey, this will destroy the faith of Muslims. If you think that telling Muslims the truth will destroy their faith, then you're acknowledging that their faith is built upon a lie.
Yeah.
Isn't that? And they're saying, hey, I don't want to tell them the truth because they'll leave Islam. It's like, wait, then you're acknowledging that their faith in Islam is based on lies, and you want to preserve that. That's wild stuff, man. Wild stuff.
The truth is very, very bitter. Speaking of the truth, you let me know earlier that there is a stream currently going on, which is about us, by a fellow YouTuber streamer who is somebody who really likes the truth and who always tells the truth, by the name of Fareed Response. I think that's still going on, right? I'm really interested in whether
is he what
hey, he's still live.
He's didn't we invite him to join us?
Yeah, we did.
Why is he live streaming about us when he could join us?
I don't know. I have no idea.
He could Fareed, I'll go ahead and say this again. Fareed, you can join us live to discuss this stuff. It won't be a shouting match. If you aren't dropping insults, we're not going to drop insults. We could just have a nice conversation. There's two of us, so you could bring someone. Bring Sajid. Bring you and Sajid on here and pick one of these topics that we're discussing, and we're happy to discuss it. Why would you want to run and talk to us about us on your channel? Notice we're inviting him. He's not inviting us.
Look, I just
No,
opened
he's the, that's what is this live right now?
Yeah, this is live right now. He's
So he's
currently
got
talking
us
about
right
himself.
there.
We are reacting live to him, reacting live to us, reacting in the past.
We should be playing his thing live while we react to it and pause it and correct it.
Wait,
Does
what?
it actually work? I can't hear it.
Yeah. Do you hear it? Oh no, we
I hear
can't hear it. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Always amateur. I can't blame you because we weren't planning this. But when if you make the same argument in a much weaker fashion about
This is so
Muhammad,
funny.
it's proof. Huh, that's a powerful point. Good point. I'm ready to abandon Islam. That powerful point that David Wood just made. All right.
This is so bad. His live stream. Oh, it has been going on for 3 hours now. He's really taking this bad.
I have to respect him because I mean we were actually playing his complete points and so on. We didn't get through the entire video, but we're playing his and Sajid's complete points. So if he's actually playing our points, then you know that's worthy of respect right there.
You know what's so funny? He goes on long rants in this live stream. I watched a little bit of it earlier on long rants because I respond to somebody who insults me with an insult toward his religion. Then I say at some point that I think Farid is one of the dumbest Muslim apologists, and he gets very upset about that.
Oh, really?
He goes on a long rant about that. I mean, he doesn't like become hysterical, but he spends too much time talking about that and saying, "Then why are you reacting to me?" Like he takes it very personally. Although I spent like a second or so on it. It's just kind of weird. I don't know.
That's interesting to note, though, isn't it? Because those are the things you want to pick up on. Like their guys call us, dumb and evil and all that stuff all day long. It just bounces right off. We don't care what they say. But he I don't know a lot about Farid. I've only seen a couple of his videos ever, but that is important to know. If that's a sore spot, good to know. Don't insult Farid, or we know your weak spot.
Anyway, he's eating right now. We shouldn't disturb him while he's eating.
Yeah, man.
But we can get back to our video while this is going on. And our video is from Shabir Ally, where he's going to explain to us that the Quran has been perfectly preserved. So are you ready to watch this?
Yeah, and the top they're talking about the Sana'a manuscript, right? Should we just talk about that when they bring it up?
Yeah, I guess we can. The whole video is about the Sana'a manuscript, but we can just address that. Let's just start with this first. I want to let the guy speak. I want to let the Quran speak.
Let's do some improvisational comedy.
Yeah, boy.
QuranSpeaks.com. Dr. Shabir, the question is, how do we regard the Sana'a manuscript? Is it pre-Uthmanic?
Okay.
Lots to unpack.
Yes. So let me start by unpacking it.
It was a yes or no question. Should we regard it as pre-Uthmanic?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mention Uthmanic. What was meant by Uthmanic? So Uthman was the third caliph in the history of Islam, and that means that after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, died, the prophecy ceased with him. But there still was a need for a ruler and a leader among the Muslims who would serve both as a religious guide and also to look after the temporal affairs. So first came Abu Bakr, a close companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him, then Omar, second caliph, and third, Uthman, the caliph. Now, in Abu Bakr's time, it was recognized that the Prophet, peace be upon him...
Okay, I appreciate the lesson, right? I appreciate the history lesson, but I don't know why the question has to be answered in such a long-winded let us start from the very beginning way.
I actually like it because like everything he's saying except for there was a caliph named Abu Bakr and stuff like that is stuff that whenever I tell this to Muslims, they've never heard any of this before. They've never heard anything about the preservation of the Quran except it's a miracle. It just magically appeared and then has magically been preserved for all time. And they never hear any of this. So it's actually cool that he gives an introduction about some of the problems and so on.
That's true.
Died without leaving the Quran in a collected volume. People had memorized the Quran in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and many more had heard him preach. So they knew the contents of the book.
Pause it. I'll just read. There are conflicting hadiths on this, but I just want to read, let's say one from Bukhari. This is Sahih al-Bukhari 3810. Anas said, the Quran was collected in the lifetime of the Prophet by 4 men, all of whom were from the Ansar. Ubay, Muad bin Jabal, Abu Zayd, and Zayd ibn Thabit. But apparently he's talking about these are the people who had supposedly memorized the Quran. So there are these hadiths about 4 people, and sometimes there are disagreements about who the 4 people were, and this contradicts later sources and so on. But the point here is, one, the Quran had not been put into a physical form. You didn't have a copy of the Quran. There are 4 people who supposedly had it. I assume this is referring to like memorizing the entire thing, that because other Muslims would have memorized parts of it. But the point here is your average Muslim thinks that, you know, there would have been thousands of companions who memorized the entire. No, there weren't. It was there were a few people who were thought to have memorized the entire Quran, and some of those guys had different views on the Quran than what you have today.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to address the whole question right now about the Sinai manuscript being pre-Uthmanic or not, or do you want to?
Yeah, it's actually debatable. I forget what he's about to say here, but yeah, I think you could argue it either way. And there are plausible. I mean, it still has to be early, because what was written over top of it is still very early. So it's extremely early, but the possible dates of it kind of overlap with the Uthman's version. So this could be something that was before that happened, or it could be after it in an area that the Uthmanic version hadn't reached yet.
So yeah, so what I know about the consensus about it is that it is considered to be pre-Uthmanic, but there is debate, right, among scholars on whether that is entirely true or not. But there is no conclusive evidence to prove that it is indeed pre-Uthmanic, but that is currently the most likely explanation. But there is still research going on.
Yeah, so the idea is, so this is discovered in a mosque in Yemen, in the Great Mosque of Sana'a, and we'll talk about this more, but there was a Quran written on it that corresponds to the Uthmanic version, but they found out that it's a palimpsest, meaning an earlier version had been erased, and they reused the parchment. So they erased an earlier version, but using science, you can get to an earlier version, because there are indentations from when people are writing, or traces of metal and so on can be left behind even after you wash it off, and then you can use like light frequencies to see what was, but they can actually see what was written underneath the most recent version. And so when you date the writing material, you get a range of dates, and some of those, that range covers the time of Uthman. And so the plausible dates of the writing are either a little before the time of Muhammad, a little before the time of Uthman, or a little after the time of Uthman. And so it's either this is actually before, it somehow survived as a palimpsest, even though it's before the time of Uthman, or it was written sometime after, and someone just didn't know. And which would actually fit. If this is down in Yemen, they might not have gotten the official Uthmanic version. But what's interesting is later, once the Uthmanic version has become official, then they scrub off the old one, and then they write down the new version.
Yeah. Mr. Space Hopper 123 said, "Why does it look like his beard is glued on?" And I want to point out that this is a very, very unprofessional, off the point comment here. But yeah, I always think when I look at him, his beard looks very strange. But I guess he has a very strict abiding to the Muslim tradition, or Muhammad's order, to shave the mustache and grow the beard. And I don't know how he does it, but it looks very strange.
Why is everyone always gotta? Yeah, I don't know what all the rules are. I know about the Muhammad's plucking schedule and stuff like that. But hey, guys, let's keep the comments on people's appearances limited to people.
Let's highlight people's appearances. Yeah.
When other people are being insulted, remember the rule: be nice until it's time not to be nice. Shabir is being perfectly nice here and spouting a lot of correct information to people who don't want to hear this.
I agree entirely. Yeah. So yes. By the way, the rule is that you should let the beard grow at least like this, but also you should just let the beard grow and trim your mustache. That is the rule. Yeah.
It has changed over the years, because I used to think Shabir had a totally awesome beard. He had this super cool boss beard. This one's a little shorter and
boss beard. Okay.
But it did not have a physical copy from the hand of the Prophet, peace be upon him. In fact, Islamic tradition says that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Hold on, I want to listen to that part again.
Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and many more had heard him preach. So they knew the contents of the book, but they did not have a physical copy from the hand of the Prophet, peace be upon him. In fact, Islamic tradition says that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not trained to read or write. So he had scribes writing down the revelation for him. One of the scribes is known as Zayd.
So here is the thing that I want to point out. I don't want to frequently pause here, but I have a problem with the whole discussion often when we go into details of the preservation of the Quran, because there is already one big major problem before we even get to the whole perfect preservation since it was written down issue. But one of the biggest claims of Islam, which is why this discussion exists, is that the Quran is the direct revealed word of Allah, and He will perfectly preserve it. And this is a miracle. This makes it so amazing. This makes Islam true, and so on. Yada yada yada. But here's the thing: you cannot in any way verify that what Muhammad recited to his immediate followers is indeed what you have in your hand today when you open the Quran. So you cannot verify that. There is no way at all to verify that. It is impossible. Number one, you cannot verify that whatever Muhammad recited is what we find in these very old manuscripts. That is number two. And number three, worst of all, you cannot verify, never come to a conclusion on whether it is true or not, that the first physical Quran is in content identical to the Quran that Muhammad orally revealed to his companions. So, there is already a huge disconnection at the very beginning between Muhammad and the first physical Quran. That phase, that progress, nobody can ever verify the truth of it. Nobody can ever tell us it is indeed the very same in content. It is already completely ruled out. So nobody can possibly come here and say it is proven that the Quran has been perfectly preserved as He revealed it. So the claim is kind of too cloudy, right?
Yeah, it's very strange, because you're talking about how would you verify this. I ask Muslims all this. I ask this from Muslims all the time. Whenever they say perfect preservation, I say, what evidence have you been given for that? Because the answer is no one has ever been given any evidence for that. They have never been given a shred of evidence for that. They heard it and they believed it and they keep passing it on. But think, how would you even in principle verify perfect preservation from the time of Muhammad, no variance anywhere, ever? The only way in theory you could verify that is if you had a copy from the time of Muhammad that is written down by him, or let's suppose,
yeah.
How would you even know? Like, if he can't read and other people are writing it down, I mean, how can you even verify that? But let's suppose that its situation was changed. Muhammad could read and write. He wrote down his own copy. And then after writing down his own copy, he stamped it, marked it in his blood. So we have DNA, and then we do DNA testing on his body and it matches up. And then we examine every single manuscript copy of the Quran in the world. We line them all up. We don't find a single letters difference anywhere between them. That's how you could then claim perfect preservation. There would still be an additional step saying, is that miraculous? Given that human beings tend to make mistakes while writing, I would actually regard it as extremely interesting and odd if every copy actually matched up. I would be, okay, that is some impressive stuff. So, but that's how you would have to verify a claim of perfect, miraculous preservation to even begin to argue that there's something supernatural at work. So there would be one way to actually verify that. You don't have anything close to that, but there are tons of ways to disconfirm it. And all of those ways are, we have all of that, right? We have piles and piles of disconfirmation. We have manuscripts that we can put side by side and they don't line up. You have different Qurans that are used in different parts of the world today that don't match up. You have all these stories in the Hadith about passages of the Quran being coming up missing and being eaten by a sheep, and chapters being lost because Muslims forgot to recite them and so on. And this is what you find in the sources. So you have a mountain of disconfirmation. And scholars across the board, actual scholars, will all acknowledge the Quran hasn't been perfectly preserved. And you've got a bunch of Muslims online going, it's perfectly preserved right down to the letter. And it's like, why is there such a massive disconnect? But anyway, point is, no, there is not the slightest bit of evidence. I challenge every Muslim in the world. Give me one shred of evidence for perfect preservation. Anything. Any evidence at all for perfect preservation of the Quran. One thing, one piece of evidence. You can't, because there is none. I can give you mountains of evidence that the Quran hasn't been perfectly preserved. So what the ongoing question is, when all the evidence tells you you're completely wrong and you have zero evidence for anything you're claiming, and then I ask you for evidence and if I find out very quickly it's all irrelevant, you just believe whatever you heard in your mosque. And it's like, is that that's what your faith is actually found? A lie you heard in the mosque? That's what it's based on? A lie you heard in the mosque? And then when your scholars tell you, guys, we need to stop spouting this lie, you hate them for it. That's weird stuff, man.
Yeah. And this is why I find the whole discussion about the perfect preservation of the Quran a little bit obsolete and already, there is a problem at the very beginning. How am I supposed to even take the rest seriously? The rest is, of course, interesting. It is, of course, interesting to figure out whether the Quran has been, after it was first written down, perfectly preserved or not, or after the first manuscript that we have, which still exists today, if it has been since then perfectly preserved or not. You can't even verify that, by the way, completely. That would be an interesting thing, but it would add nothing to the idea that the Quran has been perfectly preserved as it was revealed. There simply is no way. End of discussion. I'm sorry. And if anyone wants to come out and say, I can definitely prove it, that the Quran that Muhammad revealed to his followers is identical to the Quran that we have today, I will publicly I will give my channel to a Muslim apologist or preacher, and I will publicly convert to Islam. And I'm only saying this because I know it's impossible.
You should put out a short video challenge like that. I will delete my channel if you do this, and then tell them what it is. But notice, I've never seen one Muslim actually defend this claim that the Quran's been perfectly preserved. I've seen I see Muslims every day, endlessly. I've got piles of Muslim books that make the claim, but they just say it. Perfectly preserved, not one letter's difference between any two manuscripts ever. And I've never seen one Muslim give a shred of actual evidence for it, because you can't. Again, the only way to verify would be to have all the manuscripts lined up and to have some sort of original copy or something like that. But again, you don't even have that. I mean, even if we ignore that, you would need the original copy to know that it goes back that far. You can't even verify that today. You can't even put two manuscripts together that match up perfectly when you have all these manuscripts. Dan Brubaker, he posted one where I think there were 11 textual variants on one page of a manuscript. Like 11 on one page, and Muslims are still going around. There's not one anywhere. He's like, okay, here's 11 on one page, on one actual page. This is wild stuff, man. Wild stuff. All right.
Young man, Zayd bin Thabit, Abu Bakr is said to have commissioned him to go around and collect the Quran from the written pieces in the possessions of various individuals, whoever had written them down in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And they had written the Quran on diverse materials like the barks of trees, smooth stones, and so on. So Zayd went around, and apparently he didn't just collect all of the written pieces and put them in a box, but rather he transcribed from those pieces of writings onto sheets that were then put together as a collection of sheets called Suhuf. So this is like you might say a book in a rudimentary form. It's not bound yet. Mm-hmm. And that was kept in the possession of Abu Bakr, and then eventually passed on to Omar, the second caliph, and then to Omar's daughter, because he died suddenly before the third caliph can be instituted. and it remained in her possession. Then the third caliph came into power, and eventually, in his time, he decided to make copies of that original document and have the copies sent to various parts of the Muslim empire. At least 4 copies are agreed upon, sent to various Muslim learning centers, and one kept in his own hometown in Medina. And some reports say even more copies than these.
I mean, there are some details that he leaves out here. In
there are.
but even in the description of Zayd ibn Thabit collecting these revelations from people's writings and from their chests, as it is described in the hadith. But I'm pretty sure that, in fact, we could bring up the hadith. But in the hadith, he himself describes that it was extremely hard to do. One of the toughest things he has done. Plus, he objected to it because he thought, why would I do this when Muhammad himself didn't do it? So there was no indication to ever do something like this. It was brought up by people after Muhammad, by his representatives. Plus, what else is there? There is so much to unpack. Do you want to address something before
Yeah, multiple things. So keep in mind their goal in the beginning, the ideal was preserving the Quran by memory. It's an oral culture. We're going to memorize this giant book. Turns out that's not actually a good way to memorize a book. I mean, it's not actually a good way to preserve a book. There's the old Chinese proverb, the weakest ink will outlast the strongest memory, right? The weakest ink, you actually writing it down, will outlast the strongest memory. Why? Because, I mean, anytime you have human beings memorizing stuff, they're going to mess up. And it seems to be in the Muslim thinking that, but someone else would correct him and so on. And that's just not how it works. Over time, it morphs. I mean, what do you do when a group of Muslims then move to a different area? They move to Kufa or Syria or something like that, and they're getting something wrong. Even during the lifetime of Muhammad, they're writing it down on flat stones. They're writing it down on bones. They're writing it down on leaves. And this is all, of course, because writing supplies are limited. Even then, however, notice when they're writing it down on leaves or something like that, they're not writing down a book. They're not making a book. These were basically aids to memory. It's meant so that few people in the area would have been able to read. But if a couple people have an actual written down version, then I can come back to him later and say, hey, what was that verse again? And he'll recite it to me. Okay, yeah, now I can memorize it and so on. But we see what happens when you try to preserve a book by memory, because eventually the people who have parts of the Quran memorized start dying in battle. They start dying in battle.
Let's bring this up and read it, actually, that part, because I think that's quite interesting. Let's do this. So this is a hadith which is very well known and narrated by Zayd bin Thabit himself, who is the one in charge of the compilation. It says, Abu Bakr sent for me owing to the large number of casualties in the Battle of Al-Yamama. Yes, it is called Yamama. It's not just something.
Yeah, I always deliberately mispronounce it as Yamama, even though it's Yamama, because people crack up laughing every time I say Yamama. So I'll say it real fast and I'll go Yamama, right? Like that.
so anyway, in Yamama, a lot of people died, and wait a minute. It is actually Yamama. Yeah, funny. Yamama, while Umar was sitting with him, Abu Bakr said to me, Umar has come to me and said, a great number of Qaris, so of the Holy Quran, were killed. So reciters of the Quran were killed on the day of the Battle of Yamama. And I am afraid that the casualties among the Qaris of the Quran may increase on other battlefields, whereby a large part of the Quran may be lost. Therefore, I consider it advisable that you, Abu Bakr, should have the Quran collected. I said, how dare I do something which Allah's messenger did not do? So lots of people are dying in battle. Lots of people who have memorized and who recite the Quran are dying off, because that is how the Quran was so far preserved, merely as an oral recitation, as an oral book, not a book that was physically in existence. They are dying off. So these guys are saying, hey, before it gets completely lost, we have to compile it and put it together. Umar kept on pressing me for that till Allah opened my chest for that for which I had opened he had opened the chest of Omar, and I had in that matter the same opinion as Omar had. Very interesting description of what happens. Abu Bakr then said to me, Zayd, you are a wise young man, and we do not have any suspicion about you, and you used to write the divine inspiration for Allah's messenger, peace be upon him. So you should search for the fragmentary scripts of the Quran and collect it in one book. Zayd further said, by Allah, if Abu Bakr had ordered me to shift a mountain among the mountains from one place to another, it would not have been heavier for me than this, ordering me to collect the Quran.
It's like, it's a nightmare. I'd rather move mountains
Yeah,
than try to collect this giant mess.
yeah. So the perfect Quran, the perfectly preserved Quran, in this report, according to this report here, is scattered among the people who listened to Muhammad, written on all kinds of different things and memorized. That the main guy who is in charge of compiling the Quran, also one of the main scribes of Muhammad, says moving mountains would be heavier, harder than this. This is already kind of problematic, isn't it?
Read a little bit more until you get down to Surat at-Tawbah.
Yeah. Then I said to Umar and Abu Bakr, how can you do something which Allah's messenger did not do? Abu Bakr said, by Allah, it is something beneficial. Zayd added, so he, Abu Bakr, kept on pressing me for that until I agreed with them, whatever. And I had in that matter the opinion as there. So I started compiling the Quran by collecting it from the leafless stalks of the date palm tree, and from the pieces of leather and hides, and from the stones, and from the chests of men.
So he's getting it from everywhere. People who had memorized it. He's getting it from written and non-written.
Yeah, and I think there are other hadith which add even more sources to this. Yeah.
Might as well go ahead and finish it because Shabir mentions this last part.
Who had memorized the Quran. I found the last verses of Surah Tawbah. Verily, there has come unto you an apostle from amongst yourselves, from Huzaima or Abi Huzaima, and I added to the rest of the surah.
It's interesting because that's the only guy that remembered it. No one else remembered it. And that's actually just, if you go to the Rashad Khalifa version, he doesn't include this because Muhammad apparently, and you can't fully trust everything because it's from later sources where they're trying to justify their decisions and so on, but. Apparently Muhammad, or I don't know if it was a Caliph, I forget who, this was a long time ago, but they had told him only accept something if there are two witnesses. And then, so Rashid Khalifa is saying, wait a minute, there's only one witness for these last two verses. So he takes them out of the Quran so he can get it to match up for his miracle of the number 19. But in order to justify using these verses from this one guy, there's another story that said Muhammad said, oh, this guy's so good, he counts as two witnesses. And so they say, oh, okay, well, yeah, two witnesses, but this guy counts as two witnesses and so on. So you got all this weird stuff going on. But notice it's Muslims, you think, there are all these guys walking around, they've got the entire Quran memorized and so on. And then you read the actual sources and they're like, oh, we found the last guy who had that part memorized. It's like, wait, what makes you think there are all these guys who have the entire thing memorized if they're finding things with only one person left?
This is funny. Wait a minute.
What's up?
So you mentioned Rashid Khalifa. I wasn't aware of this at all. So I decided to look up his follower, Edip Yüksel, who basically follows in his footsteps, and he published his own Quran translation into English as well. I looked up his Quran very quickly if he did the same thing, and indeed he did, but he did it in a strange way. He added, look at this. I don't know what this is supposed to be here. This is Edip Yüksel's Quran.
Yeah, so notice it ends at 127.
It is in 127, and then here in cursive he has the remaining verses.
Yeah, as something added.
Yeah,
interesting.
But it doesn't specify why and why this is separate.
Yeah,
I couldn't see. I don't see an explanation. That's very, very. Funny.
Wild stuff. Read that last part of that hadith there, because that's what Shabir mentions. And guys, if you want to take away here, so he copies down the Quran until he gets these last two verses, and the end of the hadith there says the manuscripts of the Quran remained with Abu Bakr till Allah took him unto him. Then it remained with Umar till Allah took him unto him, and then with Hafsa bin Umar. So notice this Quran was not a Quran. When they finally compiled a copy of the Quran, it's just something that's sitting in Abu Bakr's house. And then after he dies, then it's sitting with Umar. And then after Umar, it's with his daughter Hafsa. It's just a copy. It's not meant to be shared. It's not meant to be spread around. Why do they have this one copy of the Quran? They had this one copy of the Quran because people who had the Quran memorized kept dying, and they didn't want to lose any more. In fact, this is, let me add to what was just said. Ibn Abi Dawud, there's a quote from Ibn Abi Dawud. That's the son of the famous hadith collector Abu Dawud. Ibn Abi Dawud says, in Kitab al-Masahif, quote, many of the passages of the Quran were sent down. Many of the passages of the Quran that were sent down were known by those who died on the day of Yamama. But they were not known by those who survived them, nor were they written down, nor had Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman by that time collected the Quran, nor were they found with even one person after them. Think about that very carefully. He says there were many passages of the Quran that were known by these guys who died in battle. I think Qurtubi says it was 70 of them. 70 of the Qur'an, the guys who had it, who were the reciters. Many of the passages of the Quran that were sent down were known by those who died. And then it says the Quran had not been compiled into a physical book by that time. And it says, nor were they found with even one person after them. What does that mean? If you have 70 people dying in battle, and these are the guys that have the Quran memorized, and it says many passages that they had memorized from the Quran weren't found, you couldn't find them with even one person afterwards. What's that mean? It means that a bunch of the Quran is actually lost, right? A bunch of the Quran was actually lost. The reason Abu Bakr collects the Quran into a book is to prevent that. It finally hit them. Guys, memorization is a really, really bad way to preserve a book. Abu Bakr said, go out, find whatever's left of the Quran, find whatever still exists, put it all together in a book, and we'll keep it in my house. That way, when a bunch of you other guys die in battle, we'll still have the Quran left over. Isn't that nice? And so that's what Shabir sort of he alluded to it, but he didn't mention the gory details of how much of the Quran was lost.
Yeah. Therefore, the Quran has been perfectly preserved.
Mm-hmm.
By bird is the word. Bird is the word. Said.
Don't you know about the bird? Everybody knows that the bird is a word.
I only know about this from what's the show?
You probably saw it on Family Guy.
Yeah, Family Guy. Yeah, Family Guy. Bird is the word. Made a super chat and said, "Love you guys. These live streams are lit. Thank you. I appreciate it. More like Apostate prophet."
Nice.
Stop it. I'm never late. Nick's Highlander made a super chat. Thank you, Miss Space Operas. We already read that one.
Why people keep talking about Shabir?
Mosh Cohen just became a member of the channel. Thank you and welcome, Mosh. He also made a super chat. Said, AP, I saw your last debate with Hussein. Man, that was pure stand-up at one point. We must allow the second wave Dawa Muppets to voice their opinions all the time. They are doing our job for us. Thank you. I appreciate that. To be fair to Hussein Embers, my opponent in that debate, he was pretty bad. He was very, very bad. But to be fair, in the end, toward the end of the debate, he actually had a moment of honesty and self-reflection and apologized to me for calling me names at the beginning of the debate.
That's good.
Yeah, and later said that he didn't know that I was actually a very nice person, because all he knew about me was my provocations and my hate for Islam and stuff like that. But then he realized that I'm actually a very nice person. And
I hear that whenever we actually just talk to someone, they go, "Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know you guys were nice." It's like they have these caricatures of us in mind,
Yeah.
which are when we're responding to people who are threatening to murder us and rape our wives and stuff like this. We respond to them in one way, but they say, "Oh, that's how these guys are." No, we're pretty laid back. Hats off to you think, because on the one hand you think, hey, this guy's brand new. What in the world is he doing debating Matt Dillahunty and the Apostate Prophet for his first two debates? Like that's insane. But on the other hand, you think, okay, well, he got these arguments from Zakir Naik or whoever else, and he really thinks they'll work, and so he had the confidence to bring them forward. And so hats off for having that level of confidence. Because you see a lot of the Dawa guys, they love going around and telling people who don't know anything that there are these powerful arguments, but they're not going to step on stage with someone and try to make a lot of these points. So
no, it is obviously kind of crazy to go debate against me if you are new, because everybody knows I'm the best debater in the world.
Greatest. I mean, look at even the mighty Ali Dawa for, I guess, his first debate. He just showed up and started eating grapes. He was so scared. He's like, he started getting, I guess that calms him down. So he's like, hey, give me the grapes, like a pacifier, but like for grown-ups, I don't know.
Yeah. Carol said the sweetest guys you could know. I think this just refers to me. She accidentally used plural. But yeah, let's continue with the video here.
But the idea is that now this was the dissemination. So we can think of a two-stage approach where first there is the collection of the manuscript in the time of Abu Bakr, and then a decade or so later, the publication of this document so that it's widespread. So now the copies that were sent out by Osman, these are referred to as the Osmanic copies, or more generally as the Osmanic manuscript.
I don't know if it needs to be pointed out that there is an issue with equating Uthman's sending of the Quran directly to the Uthmanic manuscript. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it is assumed that the Uthmanic manuscript is indeed, in content, that Quran in question, but that is not really entirely confirmed, right?
What you mean? We have no actual. We don't have any of the Uthmanic copies that were sent out. There are Muslims who have claimed that they have them here or there. That's based on ignorance or deception. The scholarly level are not claiming that they have one of these actual Uthmanic copies.
Okay.
Because it's handwritten, it's called a manuscript. And the Islamic tradition follows from that very closely. So basically all copies of the Quran that have been found over the centuries and studied have all proven to be copies of those original copies that were sent out by
How?
Oh, yeah. What he's saying is and well, let me put it this way. You had, and I don't remember if he mentions this, but you had independent Qurans. There was still a line of Qurans from Ibn Masud, and there was a line of Qurans from Ubay ibn Ka'b. These guys had their own independent Qurans. And then the Sana manuscript is actually different from any of those. And so it's like, hey, there were multiple versions of the Quran. And so the assumption is that when the Qurans today are all following, because other Qurans didn't follow even the same numbering system, right? They were in different orders and so on. So the assumption is that when you find copies of the Quran that have the same numbering system and the same ordering of all the verses and so on, that these are going back to a common source. But they know that the Uthmanic source wasn't the only source. There were these other Qurans that differed. And therefore, since they're lining up, it's okay. These must all somehow be based on the Uthmanic version that was given to people. So you don't actually have it to verify it, but it seems reasonable to say, okay, these are all matching up in a way that other Qurans didn't match up, so they must go back to a common source. It can't be Muhammad because there were other versions of the Quran back then. So we only kind of know of one common source, Uthman.
Yeah.
Osman. So they're all Osmanic copies, except for one. In 1972, a mosque was being repaired in Sana'a in Yemen, and it was found that in the ceiling of the mosque, there were many old documents stashed. And among the documents, some were Quranic copies. And there was one of particular interest that came to be widely referred to now as the Sana'a palimpsest. Why is it called a palimpsest? A palimpsest, well, you know this. It's an erased manuscript. So somebody had a manuscript. They wrote on it, then erased it and wrote something else over it. So this particular palimpsest had a copy of the Quran written, apparently a copy of the Quran, that was erased, and then a new copy of the Quran was written over it. Now, the new copy, which is referred to as the upper level or the upper layer of this text, that corresponds closely to what we're reading today as an Uthmanic copy, a copy of the Uthmanic codices. The lower text shows some significant variations, not so significant as to challenge any of the things that Muslims practice or even what we believe. So no severe effect or major effect on the Muslim practices, and no effect on Muslim belief. But nonetheless, there are...
Go ahead and pause it. That is very interesting.
Go ahead. I wanted to say something, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to point it. So what he said, there are all kinds of variants. Guys, if you want to learn a word today, make sure you know the word palimpsest. Again, that is where people write on something, parchment or something like that. They write on it and then erase it later to reuse it, write something else over it, and then now we find we can actually detect that earlier layer and then read the earlier layer. That's a palimpsest, writing on top of other writing. The version of the Quran there, it's a different ordering of chapters. Sometimes you occasionally have like a verse, missing, or you have something added. You have tons of textual variants. You have tons of textual variants in it. What does Shabir say? He says, but it's not something that affects Islamic belief or practice. It's not, the variants do not, in other words, you don't get to a variant that says that, there's more than one God, or that Muhammad isn't a prophet or something. There's nothing that affects basic Islamic doctrine or practice. Guess what? I agree with him. The only thing that the Sana'a manuscript is a threat to is your belief in perfect preservation of the Quran. That's what it's a threat to. Because if we're to think, hey, Muhammad is having his followers memorize a bunch of parts of the Quran, and then he dies, and then they try to compile it, and they've got some written on leaves, they've got some that are memorized, they've got some that are written on bones and so on, and they try to compile this. I would expect that to be a pretty messy process, right? It would not surprise me to find people organizing them differently, or missing a verse here or there, or changing the words here or there. That would not surprise me. So that would not affect my belief in whether this is what Muhammad delivered to his followers. The problem is when you believe in this lie, this perfect preservation lie. This should completely destroy your confidence. The existence of the Sana'a manuscript, the existence of the Sana'a palimpsest, should completely destroy your confidence in this miraculous, perfect, letter for letter, word for word preservation. So that's one thing. The other thing is, notice Shabir's defense is, okay, so even though the Quran hasn't been perfectly preserved, and that's just a myth, you can rest assured that these textual variants don't change doctrine or practice. Now, isn't that interesting? Because that's exactly what Christians say. That's exactly what Christians point out when they go, we heard from Bart Ehrman that there are a bunch of textual variants in the Bible. Yeah, the vast majority of those variants are things like spelling differences and so on. You can spell different words in different ways and so on. The vast majority of them are like spelling differences. And there's nothing that affects Christian doctrine or practice. So his defense that he's using here for textual variants in the Quran is exactly what Christian scholars say. Hey, you can line up all the manuscripts of the Bible. It's the same Bible. It's the same message. It's the same gospel. It's the same everything. They're just textual variants because that's what happens when human beings copy down texts. And notice, it's the same thing is true in Islam, as is true in the history of Christianity. You have varying levels of ability when it comes to writing manuscripts. You have professional scribes, people who are trained, that's their job. They're experts in copying manuscripts. You also have people in church and mosques who aren't trained as professional scribes. They just, hey, I need a copy of this. So let's suppose you're an early Christian in the first century. You get a copy of the Gospel of John. Hey, but this copy belongs to that church in that city. I really want it. Okay, I'm going to have to go to that city and copy this down. Okay, you might be a great scribe, or you might be an average scribe, or you might barely, you might know how to write, but you haven't been trained in copying manuscripts. That would have been a pretty rare ability back then. So that's true in Islam as well. So if you said, hey, here's a really weird manuscript from a guy who wasn't the greatest scribe of all or something like that, it wouldn't bother me at all. But for some reason in the Islamic mindset, even though, look at what Shabir is saying. He's saying basically the same thing that applies to the Bible applies to the Quran. But Muslims will say it's a problem for Christians, but not for Muslims. And that's the concern here. It's like, okay, if having textual variance is a problem, then it's a problem for both. It's a problem for if having textual variance is evidence that a book has not been preserved, great. Then say both the Bible and the Quran have not been preserved. Say it both. Say it for both. Or if you're like me and you say, okay, anytime human beings are copying something, they're going to make mistakes. That's what textual criticism is for, by the way. You can line up the manuscript, you can light up the manuscripts, and you can spot where someone makes a spelling mistake or something. You can spot it. In Islam, they pretend it doesn't happen. It's still going on. They're doing textual criticism and so on at the scholarly level. They're not doing it at the popular level. The popular level still doesn't know it exists. But notice, what is Shabir's defense of textual variance and a different ordering of the chapters? And so what's his defense? His defense is, but it doesn't affect Islamic belief or practice. I agree. It doesn't affect in the Bible either. So why do you attack the Bible based on textual variants that don't affect Christian doctrine or practice? Yep. But it's perfectly acceptable in Islam. Stop the hypocrisy, and we're good. We're good after that.
Yep. So long story short, yeah. So when Muslims say that the Quran has been perfectly preserved because Allah protected it, that is already a belief. That is already a doctrine in and of itself, which is
that's true.
Which is announced by the Quran and which is held by Muslims all around the world, regardless of what theological school they belong to. So when we point out that there are variants, that there are differences, that there are, maybe out of human doing, that there are inconsistencies between different texts of the Quran, and they then say to us, yeah, well, but it doesn't really change anything because the content is still pretty much the same. Okay, yeah, fine. I don't care. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the whole existence of these variations and these differences and discrepancies refutes the entire idea, the entire belief, the entire doctrine that the Quran has been perfectly preserved from the very beginning to the very end, as it is often propagated. It simply proves that whole idea wrong. It proves it false, especially the idea that the Quran has been perfectly preserved word for word, letter for letter, dot for dot, and all that, which is an idea that has been propagated by Muslim scholars and apologists and regular Muslims forever now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what's interesting is like some of the, because you have tons of textual variants in the Sanaa palimpsest that are like word differences and so on, or it gives a different word here or there. Sometimes you have verse differences, like a verse of a chapter will be missing. But one of the interesting things I remember is, remember Ali Dawah tried to trick you on the, don't you know that every single verse of the Quran begins with Bismillah? Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that right? He's trying to trick it, because notice that's the entire like message of the da'is are not actually trying to refute arguments. They're trying to discredit people so that you don't listen to their arguments. In other words, if I sat down and I gave you an hour's worth of evidence of textual variants in the Quran, the Muslim response, the response of the Dawah guys would not be to refute what I'm saying. It would be to discredit me. Here's the reason you should not listen to him, right? That's what they do, because they don't want to actually deal with the arguments, because the arguments destroy them. So he was trying to get you at that. What's interesting is, so if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, every chapter of the Quran begins with this Bismillah, right? Except Surah 9. What's interesting is in the Sanaa palimpsest, it actually has the Bismillah at the beginning of Surah 9. But then, so it gives the verse there. So it has that extra verse there at the beginning of Surah 9. What's interesting is the very next verse is, do not say in the name of Allah here. And it's like, wait a minute, what is that? What is that next verse that says, do not say that here? And it's like, it just said, say it. And then it says, don't say it. So is that an addition? Like someone saying, don't say this out loud for some reason? Or is it saying, is that an abrogation of some kind, or what in the world is that? But it says in the name of Allah, and then it says, but don't say that, don't say this here. And so it's like, it's almost like there was some reason for taking that out that happened afterward, and he's aware of it being said, do not say this. And then in the Uthmanic version, they actually just take it out completely. And so what you see is there's some sort of process going on. That's what it shows. It shows there's some sort of process going on in the history of the Quran, when your average Muslim believes, nope, delivered to Muhammad and then passed on to us perfectly. And it's like, it's clear there are things going on here. But notice, I mean, you've got there you have at least an extra verse right there at the beginning of Surah 9. And then you have a verse missing later from in Surah 9 in the same manuscript. So it's like perfect preservation, guys. Seriously, perfect miraculous preservation. It looks like I don't know. It looks like some weird. It looks like they're still figuring out their thinking on the Quran early on, and then Uthman steps in and says, "We need to stop this mess. Here's the version. Live with it."
Yeah. It is just a very, very weird thing. I mean, it is a book that is in existence, a book that is carried first by oral tradition, then by compilations and writings and different notes, and everybody knows that that the book is being worked on. At least, that the main guys know. But then at the same time, they begin propagating the idea that the book is perfectly preserved, that it has been, which is also a thought that developed over time, according to many scholars. Like I talked to, I keep forgetting his name, man. That Harvard scholar on the Quran. Somebody tell me his name if you remember it in the comment section. But I asked him, and his idea is also that this whole idea that the Quran has been perfectly preserved is not an idea that was there in the very beginning, but it's rather one that developed over time and reached its final form, which it is today. That it has been perfectly preserved word for word only much later in Islamic history.
Yeah, that's very recent, because I mean, think even I mean, they say it's 1924 when they say, all right, this is the version we're going to foist on everyone and stuff like that. So like, and you can read the Muslim sources and the commentaries and so on, they always seem to be aware of textual variants. I mean, if you read Tafsir Jalalain, he's constantly saying, hey, there's another version of this, there's another version of that, there's this alternate reading here, there's this alternate reading there. And somehow you get down to modern Muslim, they're not familiar with anything in their commentaries, anything in their sources. And it's just whatever I heard from my imam, who obviously lied to me, I'm just going to believe that. And no evidence will ever change my mind. Even if you put manuscripts right in front of my face, even if Hatun Ta shows up with 37 different Qurans, shows them all right in front of my face, I will accuse her of printing those all herself before I will acknowledge there are any textual variants, because my imam said it.
Yeah. See, lots of people in the comment section are pointing out it was indeed Shadi Nasser whom I asked, and he explained that very, very well too.
You know what that looks like? You saw Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Remember the Shady Nasty? it was pronounced. Her name was Shadynasty, but it looked like Shady Nasty.
Yeah. It's a joke that I make quite often at home with my wife. Still, Shadynasty. It's funny.
Variations of words. And sometimes the sequence of a verse, is interchanged there. And the sequence of surahs, chapters, instead of going with the sequence that we have now in our documents, commonly known as the Quran. So that became of keen interest to academia, because academics want to know the history and origins of things. They want to trace developments over time. They want to see changes and evolution, and so on. So that became of keen interest to them. But largely Muslims have not had much reason from a religious point of view to be bothered by this, because it's not like it challenges anything that we believe, or nor does it upset any of the practices that we're accustomed to as Islamic practices.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the question still stands, right? Like, how is it possible that there was this manuscript there, right, palimpsest, as you mentioned, when Uthman is purported to have sent out all of these manuscripts that were the official ones to different parts of the world?
Yes. So one answer to this is that this is probably pre-Uthmanic in that.
Probably. That's what I would say. So you can't be certain, but it looks pre-Uthmanic.
Yeah, possibly.
Uthman made this.
He said probably, not
copies
possibly.
Of that document.
Yeah, I say possibly.
I say probably. Me and Shabir say probably.
I will say possibly.
AP says possibly.
which was with Abu Bakr. Other companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, could have been compiling their own copies as well. So
They were.
remember, we said
Peace be upon him.
that Abu Bakr, who I will now point out, lived on only 2 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon
Peace be upon him.
him. So he had that original collection done within the 2 years of his caliphate. And then and Omar was in vogue for 10 years, and then came Uthman. So within the 10 years of Omar's time, you can well imagine that other companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, not having
Peace be upon him.
access to that original document, which was only there for safekeeping in the time of Omar.
Look here. By the way, you have to
others.
You have to notice Shabir is aware when he says it's there for safekeeping. This is a guy who knows the Muslim traditions about massive sections of the Quran coming up missing because the only people who had them memorized died in battle. If Shabir really thought that human memory was this perfect tool of preservation, which he obviously doesn't. If he really thought that, and if the early Muslim community thought that was a great idea, there would have never been a point to write it down. If they thought human memory is the perfect tool for passing on a book, then there was never a need for this safeguard, right? Hey, we've got this copy of the book. So anyway, that's just interesting to me that like the entire pretty much every Muslim you run into today says perfect preservation. And when you say, but there are these differences in the manuscripts, and they go, but the memories of the people were all perfect. And because the entire community has so many parts of it memorized, they will never forget this. And that's why it's like, wait a minute, what you're saying is a great way to preserve a book is what the first generation of Muslims realized was a disaster. And therefore they wrote it down. Right. So you're saying the opposite of what is actually the case.
You know what this reminds me of? Earlier, I was watching this live stream by Fareed about us, and he takes an issue with something that you said in the stream that he's reviewing.
He does? Shame on him.
He says there is a part where you talk about Bukhari, the scholar Bukhari, and you say that that he went around and gathered so many reports and ruled that so many of them were inauthentic, or outright lies.
It's not that they're inauthentic. A bunch of them were. Like I don't know what Fareed is responding to here, but it's not that they're all inauthentic. It's, I mean, he had his best of the best collections, but I mean, he even had others for another collection and so on. So, and it's not that there's a ton of reasons for rejecting a hadith or for not including it. But so a bunch of them are fabrications. A bunch of them don't have to be fabrications, but I just can't verify this and so on. And then, and then you put
the point there is you were talking about him encountering a lot of hadith that are outright fabrications.
Yeah, and that's not disputed.
And pointing out that that he is already in an environment where he is used to the idea that that lying, for your religion is quite common. And as you say this, Fareed then objects and jumps in and says, "Wow, how dare he? How can he just sit down here and make this assumption about a different culture, accusing us of dishonesty, and basically arguing that Muslims are liars? Would it be okay if I sat down and said Christians are liars or early Christians were liars?" And I'm just sitting there thinking, what? Did you get the point at all?
Guys. If your hadith collectors have to go through hundreds of thousands to get to ones they regard as the best of the best, and then again, it's not just here are the hundreds of thousands that are all obvious fabrication. It's not that. It's there can be all kinds of reasons for not including hadith. Point is, there are tons and tons of fabrications. That's not disputed. And the point, like, notice even, gosh, how do I put that? The story of the Satanic verses. I have 50. I have 50 Muslim sources on the Satanic verses. Would Fareed grant that the Satanic that's true? That narration is true? No, of course not. So here's the point. It's based on what Muslims are telling us. When we quote a bunch of hadiths and they go, that's a weak hadith. Oh, that's a weak. Okay, are you saying it's been made up? Who's making this up? You got the Muslim community making up tons of stories in order to justify their views and points. And it's like, okay, why did they feel comfortable doing that? Why did these guys feel like it's okay if I'm having an argument with someone, I could just make up a source? They felt really comfortable lying. And notice that's never changed. What are we arguing about right now? What in the world are we arguing about right now? We're arguing because almost every Muslim scholar in the world tells every average Muslim perfect preservation right down to the letter, and it's a lie. Why is there this lie? The lie is because we want you to be confident in your belief, even if we have to lie to you. Okay, it's still a part of Islam. Why is this the case in Islam? That lying has just always been perfectly acceptable as long as it's to convince people that Islam is true and that they have the truth. It's weird.
Alhamdulillah, very well put.
Could have gone out and made their own collection as well. Just as Zayd bin Thabit went around and consulted other people and said, okay, show me your copy there. Or you got that flat stone, let me see what's written, and he writes it down. Other companions...
It's a very nice, very nice visualization.
Could have done the same thing as well. Or they could have written from their own memories because they were there alive with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, hearing him preach, sitting in his circles, getting the Quran dictated from him as well. So whatever they have written down, either from their own personal dictation from the mouth of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or by consulting other companions or hearing public preachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
So here's the thing. Look, the issue that I just have with stuff like this is, and you can call me an extreme skeptic here, I guess, I don't know, but if one of the main claims is that Allah is the protector of the Quran, and if one of the main claims by Muslims nowadays especially is Islam is true because the Quran is the only religious book that has been perfectly preserved, then why is this not more significant? And this is just me personally saying, if that is the claim, I would like it to be objectively verifiable in such a way that we can today, as historians or regular people, sit down and with clear confidence say, this book is exactly what Muhammad spoke to his fellow people, to his peeps around him. It's exactly what he revealed. It exactly came out of his mouth on paper. It is right there. I don't know if Allah would make it possible with some modern technology or with in any other way, but I would like such a claim, such a truth claim, to be objectively verifiable in a very clear way. Because as it stands, as Shabir Ally, he describes it as well, and others do too, and honest scholars do all the time, the only thing we have is that if you trust Muslim traditions, you may conclude that the Quran has been perfectly preserved because you somehow trust these people and their judgments, and that there is somehow a divine plan of preserving all of this. Unfortunately, you cannot sit down and objectively verify that it has been perfectly preserved. So the Quran has been perfectly preserved is a claim that is not objectively entirely true. This is a fact. And when that fact stands, that whole idea, that whole doctrine becomes a problem, a major problem, and becomes completely dispensable, false, wrong, weak.
Check this out. And as far as I can tell, this should bring all the myths crumbling to the ground right now. Think about what Shabir is just saying, right? Because here's the point. None of this fits together. This does not make sense. Here's what doesn't make sense. Shabir just said, and you read the hadith. Abu Bakr tells Zayd ibn Thabit, put together the Quran into a book. Shabir just talked about how Zayd's going around doing this. Oh, let me get this from this flat stone. Oh, do you have this memorized? Do you have that memorized? Think about this. Zayd is one of 4 people who were said to have memorized the entire Quran during the lifetime of Muhammad. All that dude would need to do is sit down and write it all down, right? I mean, isn't that all you would need to do?
Yeah.
If this guy who's charged with collecting the Quran has memorized the entire Quran from Muhammad, wouldn't he just need to sit down and write it all down? Instead, it's, hey, you got that on a stone? Oh, you got this on a leaf? Oh, I heard you remembered a verse here. It's like, wait a minute. I thought you memorized the entire thing during the lifetime of Muhammad. And even if you hadn't, Ubay did, right? Supposedly. Ubay had the entire Quran. Why don't you go to Ubay? Just sit down at the feet of Ubay. Or even if you want two witnesses, great. Zayd, Ubay, get over here. Let's write down everything. Now we got two witnesses because we both have the Quran entirely memorized, right? That's what should happen. That should be the easiest. I mean, it's still a lot of work writing down an entire book, but that had happened a lot of times. People copied down books back then. That's how it worked. The Quran isn't that long. It's shorter than the New Testament. So why would this be such a monumentally difficult task? Why would this be such an insanely difficult task? It doesn't make any sense if the Muslim stories about people like Zayd having the Quran memorized are true. In other words, if Shabir's right and Zayd's running around trying to put together the Quran, this calls into question whether he or any single person had the entire Quran memorized. Because if any person had the entire Quran memorized in a reliable fashion, you just need to sit down and let him dictate it to you. But they didn't. What's that mean? That I would take that as pretty conclusive proof that no one had this thing memorized in any fashion that they could say, I know the entire Quran right down to the letter. And so it destroys the entire myth. You brought up this hadith. So this is kind of, scroll down to the end. This is a long hadith. Scroll down to the end.
Long hadith. Okay.
Yeah. So look at several lines up there. So look. Matter of fact, let me start out. Go up to OU a little higher in there. OU Muslim people, I am removed from recording the transcription of the Mus'haf, and it is overseen by a man, by Allah. When I accepted Islam, he was but in the loins of a disbelieving man, meaning Zayd ibn Thabit, the guy who collected the Quran for Uthman. And it was regarding this that Abdullah ibn Masud said, O people of Iraq, keep the Musahif, those are your copies of the Quran that are with you, and conceal them. For indeed, Allah said, and whoever conceals something, he shall come with what he concealed on the day of judgment. So meet Allah with the Musahif, right? So look at what he's saying. Abu Bakr and later Uthman say, have Zayd ibn Thabit collect the Quran. So Uthman has Zayd sort of redo it. And then Uthman orders everyone to hand over their copies of the Quran, to burn them so that he can hand out his official version. Abdullah ibn Masud, one of Muhammad's companions, said, don't hand over your copies of the Quran. Keep the ones you have. And he insults Zayd. He said, hey, what's he say about him? When I accepted Islam, he was but in the loins of a disbelieving man. He's saying he's a little kid. He's a little kid, right? So he says, keep the Musahif that you have.
It's way worse than just he's a kid.
Yeah. So notice he's saying, do not. By the way, people who don't know who Abdullah ibn Masud is, Muhammad said, if you want to learn the Quran from anybody, learn it from 4 people. Zayd was not on that list. Abdullah ibn Masud was first on the list. So Muhammad said, if you want to learn the Quran from anyone, he didn't say Zayd ibn Thabit. He said this guy. Learn it from this guy. First on Muhammad's list of the best Quran experts of all time. Muhammad's hand-picked expert in the Quran. If you want to learn the Quran from anyone, learn it from this guy. And this guy says, hey, who's this idiot? Who's this idiot putting together Quran for Uthman when I know way better? And he says, hey, we're all handing our Qurans over to be burned. Don't do that. Keep the Qurans you have. Now notice, if your average Muslim was correct, there would be no differences in their Qurans because every Quran has always been the same, right? And Ibn Masud is saying, hide your Qurans, people. Hide your Qurans. Don't let them burn your Qurans because you can't trust their Quran. This is amazing stuff. So notice, there are only 2 possibilities here, AP. There are only 2 possibilities here. Either Muhammad knew what he was talking about or he didn't. If Muhammad knew what he was talking about when he said, you want to learn the Quran from anyone, learn it from Abdullah ibn Masud, then you can't trust the Quran today because Ibn Masud didn't. And that's Muhammad's top guy in the Quran. So either Muhammad knew what he was talking about or he didn't. So if Muhammad knew what he was talking about, then you should reject the Quran today. And you don't have the Quran because you don't have Abdullah ibn Masud's Quran. Or the alternative is Muhammad didn't know what he's talking about. And Muhammad didn't even know who a great reciter of the Quran was.
Well, I would say since the objective here is to defend Islam, if Muhammad praised this guy and said you should learn it from him, and if his conclusions are contrary to the idea of this perfect preservation by the guy Zayd ibn Thabit, then this would mean that Muhammad had no idea what he is talking about. This is what we can conclude as Muslims. Alhamdulillah.
Look,
Makes no
at
sense.
look at that last part there.
Makes no sense.
Look at that last part. It was conveyed to me that some men amongst the most virtuous of the companions of the Messenger of Allah disliked that view of Ibn Masud. They don't like Ibn Masud saying, "Don't give this guy your Quran.
Hide your Qurans."
This is amazing stuff. Hide your Qurans. Hide your Qurans from Uthman coming to burn them all.
First, they came for our Qurans. Yeah.
Isn't it like AP? It's still surprising to me that you can put all of this in front of a Muslim and it'll still be, no, I heard from my imam all my life, perfect preservation right down to the letter. It's like, wait, this is Abdullah ibn Masud telling you that the Quran you have today. I don't know what to do. The point is, if someone's saying no amount of evidence will ever shake me out of something I heard at some point, it's like, well, I don't know what to do then, because all we can do is put the evidence in front of your face. If you don't want to pay any attention to it, I don't know, man. This is so weird.
So I mean, we have the sources here ruled authentic, describing that the early companions of Muhammad, the early companion of Muhammad, has a big issue with Zayd ibn Thabit and with how the Quran was compiled and reached us in the end. And this is the beginning of the perfect preservation of the Quran. It looks very problematic. I mean, I would take it more seriously if we could trace back a historical event of, I don't know, the High Council of Medina coming together with a bunch of scholars sitting together, led by Muhammad, maybe organizing the Quran and turning it into a book and saying, "This is the book. This is how it will remain for all eternity." But instead, you have these guys fighting and gathering it from all kinds of people who are dying, gathering it from bones and rocks and trees.
It's a very, very sloppy, messy process.
Yeah.
And you look at what actually happened. Muhammad had a bunch of people memorize parts of the Quran and write down little parts, and then he dies. And then a bunch of people who had little parts memorized died, and then parts of the Quran that were written on things that sheep eat are eaten by sheep. And then they're all in a state of panic because they're losing the Quran. Hey, we were entrusted to keep this Quran going, and then we're losing parts of it because we're dying in battle. And then okay, we at least need one physical copy. And notice, by the way, AP, later on, when Uthman decides to hand out the official versions, that should be the easiest thing in the world because they already have a compiled copy, right? They already had the version compiled during the time of Abu Bakr. They still have that. All you'd have to do is make some copies and send that out. They don't. What's he do? He redoes the process using that as a source as well, but he's still going out and redoing the process. And it's like, this is like a really, really messy, sloppy process. How in the name of common sense could you ever look at this and go, it's a miracle?
Of course, the burning of the Qurans was also a sign of perfect preservation. And
yeah, we have to burn all these perfect copies of the Quran.
Yeah.
All these perfect identical copies of the Quran. We have to burn them all.
Yeah. That was perfect.
This is amazing, man.
Burning preservation, hot preservation of the Quran.
And then going and writing down what they remember from that public preaching. So many other companions could have had their own codices during this period of time. And so we have codices mentioned, a codex of Ibn Masud, and a codex of Ubay bin Ka'b, and many other companions as well.
Okay.
So that's how we could have a codex which is pre-Uthmanic.
Just wanted to mention, according to Ibn Abi Daud's Kitab al-Masahif, Ibn Masud had 111 chapters in his Quran. He did not believe that Surah 1, Surah 113, and Surah 114 are supposed to be in the Quran because these are prayers. His claim was, these are us talking to Allah, not Allah. The Quran is Allah speaking to us. That's Allah's speech. These are our speech to Allah. These should not be in the Quran. Ubay bin Ka'b had 116 chapters. He had those 3 prayers. He included the 3 prayers, And he had 2 additional prayers. He had 2 additional Muslim prayers that he thought were not just prayers, they're actually part of the Quran. And Zayd ibn Thabit seems to have compromised, right? Like, I'll take some of them, but not all of them, right? Like, I'll compromise between you. And he ends up with 114. But notice that the point here is, like, they couldn't even agree on what went into the Quran. And I don't know. I have no idea how you could look at any of this and say perfect, miraculous preservation.
Yeah. So it's very strange to read, but in the Quran, actually, the last 3 chapters, specifically the last 2 chapters, which are very similar in kind, are just prayers to ask Allah for, to prayers directed as a believer to Allah. Then the first chapter is called the opener, or Fatiha, which is just, "Oh Allah, most merciful, please, keep us on the right way," and this and that. It is just a prayer, and that's how it opens, and that is the word of Allah, which is kind of interesting. I mean, you could start the book with a prayer. It would be understandable that there is a prayer at the beginning of a book, and that you are supposed to start the book with the prayer. That would be the wisdom of it, the hikmah, as Sajid would say. The hikmah. But the fact that this is considered the perfectly preserved, direct, verbatim word of Allah, and it starts with a prayer, it's kind of weird. So early Muslims did take an issue with this, and you can see that in Masood's version, for example.
Yeah, and notice there's also a theological oddity there in the Quran, where it's something you're supposed to say or something Muhammad is supposed to say. It says say. It says say this. Surah Al-Fatiha doesn't say, which means that this isn't Allah eternally saying, "Hey everyone, you're going to say this." It's just Allah eternally saying. If that's the eternal speech of Allah and that's part of the Quran, then from all eternity, Allah has been reciting a prayer, and his prayer is to Allah, to himself, I guess, to not be like the Jews or Christians. Right? So Allah is constantly saying, "Oh, please, self, don't let me be like the Jews or Christians. Please, please, please."
That is one interpretation. Yeah, that's one interpretation of it.
Isn't that weird? It doesn't say it. Yeah, the point is, it doesn't say. So if this is actually the Quran, and it's not Allah saying say, it's just Allah always saying, "In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially."
Yeah. So this is how the Quran starts. You open the Quran and translated in Sahih International, it says, "In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, Allah, all praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds."
This is Allah talking to himself.
Yeah, this is Allah talking basically here to himself. "Sovereign of the day of recompense, it is you who we worship, and
it is you." This is Allah speaking. Allah is saying, "It is you we worship."
"Oh Allah, guide us to the straight path, Allah."
And this is Allah saying this.
"The path of those upon whom you have bestowed favor, not of those who have earned your anger or those who are astray." These verses are, according to scholarly early interpretations, this verse is about Christians and Jews. So don't make us like the Christians and Jews. Yeah. Make us people who are on the straight path. But yeah, so this is how the Quran begins. And it is very strange to think that this is the beginning of Allah's eternal speech to you. Right?
Yeah. This is
interesting stuff.
I mean, this is interesting. So anyway, the point here is, you can see why someone like Ibn Masud would say, "Guys, this is us talking to Allah. What do you think Allah is saying this? This doesn't make any sense."
You idiots. Yeah. That's the issue.
And that could be at variance with the Uthmanic Codex. And then once Uthman
rewind it a bit. I don't want people to miss that. He's saying Ubay's Codex and Ibn Masud's Codex could be at variance with Uthmanic Codex, because we know it, because we don't have these anymore, but there was a time when they still existed. And Ibn Abi Dawud's Kitab al-Masahif lists it all. Someone really needs to translate that. We need to fund that. We might need to fund that ourselves. Find some Arabic translators and fund the translation of Kitab al-Masahif, because it is one long book going through variants in the Quran when, according to Muslims, there are none. But he includes, so he'll have the verses and he'll say, "This is how Ubay had it. This is how Ibn Masud had it. This is how Zayd's version has it," and so on. And yeah, Shabir just pointed out these Qurans differed back then.
Yeah, let's hear him say it.
We could have a codex which is pre-Uthmanic, and that could be at variance with the Ottomanians could have had their own codices during this period of time. And so we have codices mentioned, a codex of Ibn Masud and a codex of Ubay bin Ka'b and many other companions as well.
Okay.
So that's how we could have a codex which is pre-Uthmanic, and that could be at variance with the Uthmanic codex. And then once Uthman has this publicized, then Muslims naturally fell in place and copied that. They knew that this was an official document, not done by one person, but done under the aegis of the caliph.
So Muslims then obey the authority and follow the rulings of the authority and say, okay, we'll do whatever.
We'll stick with your version.
We'll stick with your version. This is now the Quran.
Even though Ibn Masud is going, no, hide your Qurans. Hide your Qurans from these people, want to burn them. Isn't this awesome? Perfect preservation, man.
Perfect preservation, bro.
Notice, I mean, if Shabir were to stick with the myth, there shouldn't be anyone with any different version of the Quran. And it's just amazing because you still got people like Sneako. There's only one Quran. There's only one Quran ever. And here's Shabir. No, Ubay had his. Ibn Masud had his. Other companions had his. But when Uthman said, "Here's the one," they fell in line. Even though we've got the records of Ibn Masud saying, "No, don't fall in line. Do not fall in line on this. You are responsible to Allah for preserving this Quran. I heard this directly from Muhammad himself. What are you talking about? We're going to let Zayd pick it." And then anyway, a few decades ago, they decided, nope, we'll just say one Quran perfectly preserved and people will buy it. No, but notice the parallel, AP. Uthman says it, and then everyone has to fall in line. And here you have today, a Muslim, my Muslim leader said it, and therefore we all have to fall in line. He said perfect preservation. Who cares? Who cares what reality is?
Yeah, that's how it is, man.
Always
Islam is more
line.
important than reality.
Gotta submit, not to Allah. Submit to your imam.
Islam is more important than reality.
Apparatus and the wherewithal to make sure.
Ridda Rasul sounds cooler.
Sunan Abu Dawood and Ridda Rasul spitting facts. This is funny.
Ridda Rasul sounds cool.
Yeah. Ridda meaning apostasy, but also
that's awesome.
That's funny. Yeah,
that we are publishing a document that accurately represents the preaching of our prophet some decades ago.
So the upper level of the text, was that also dated by scholars?
So scholars can only date the parchment.
Oh, okay.
And by dating the parchment, we are finding out when the animals from whose skin the parchment is made was alive.
Okay.
So it was found that this parchment must have been produced within a couple of decades after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So,
peace be upon him.
This
so he's correct. If you're like carbon dating or something like that, yeah, you're figuring out that tells you around the time when the animal died. You can still date things based on the text, like the writing style and things like that. And that just gives you kind of a range, like here's when people were writing like this. And based on the writing style of the upper level, so that's the level you could still see without special equipment. Based on the upper level, it's dated to the end of the 7th century or the beginning of the 8th century. Notice that's still very early. That's still within a century of the death of Muhammad. So that's still a very early manuscript. That's the upper level. So the upper level, which we can read, that's the one after things were erased and was rewritten, is still an early manuscript. But then there's a level below it, which contains all the variants. And so if the upper level is early, but there was some earlier version still, that suggests that you're dealing with a pretty early Quran and just different. It's just interesting that it has so many differences between the Quran, the perfect Quran you have today.
That is true. That is true.
By the way, I've noticed a parallel. It's that in Islam, they seem to know more as time goes on, right? Like if I think, okay, so Jesus' followers were with Jesus. Who knows more about Jesus, me or them? I would say they did, right? They were there, right? They recorded some stuff, but they obviously would have known all kinds of things that they didn't record, and therefore I can only go on what was written. But they would have known more than that. You can't end up with people 2 centuries later who somehow know way more than the original guys did, because you can only know you can only know what was written down by those guys, and those guys would have known more than they actually wrote down. So you don't know more as time goes on. But notice when it comes to like hadiths and so on, the further you go, the more they know, right? They keep building up stories more and more as time goes on. But even with the Quran, you look at the stories about the Quran, they're still trying to figure this out early on. And yet today, your average Muslim thinks he knows more than these early guys. Yeah. Your average Muslim today think, I know about the Quran. I've never studied it. I've never studied the history of it. I just heard this from my mom. Perfect preservation right down to the letter. And every letter perfectly preserved. And they didn't believe that at the beginning. So you somehow just know more as time goes on about Islam than the originals.
Yeah. Khalid also said, is it possible that the reason the Quran was not preserved earlier could be due to a controversial belief that it might diminish the status or authority of a reciter? Big khilafa coming for your Quran. Do you know anything about this? I haven't really studied the depths of the Quran preservation topic for the reasons given earlier. So,
yeah. I mean, there are all kinds of possibilities, because I mean, keep in mind what we're going on is later people, right? So, I mean, we read a passage from Tirmidhi, and we read a passage from Bukhari, and these are sources written 2 centuries later. So these people 2 centuries later talking about things that happened earlier. And so the question is, how seriously do you take these? I take the general framework and timeline pretty seriously. I'm not completely confident in it, but going with that, it really seems that they thought human memory was a good idea. Mm-hmm. Human memory was a really good way of preserving a book. And then reality kicked in, right? Reality kicked in when people who have parts of the Quran memorized start dying. It got so bad. Ibn Umar, that's the son of the rightly guided Caliph Umar, one of Muhammad's. Ibn Umar was a companion of Muhammad. Ibn Umar showed up one day, and people were bragging, started bragging. This is later. This is after the death of Muhammad. This is when you get to the next generation. Mm-hmm. He saw people from the next generation of Muslims, people who didn't know Muhammad. The next generation, he saw them bragging that they had memorized the Quran, and he scolded them. He said, don't say you've memorized the entire Quran. How can you say that you've memorized the entire Quran when so much of it has been lost? He says, you should say, I've memorized what remains. Just say that. I've memorized what remains. That's these early guys. So it looks like it was just if you're going with the sources, it looks like it was just a sloppy process. They understood that it's a sloppy process. They did the best they could. They adapted when they ran into problems. It was a big mess. And they eventually came up, okay, here's what we've got left. Let's keep this. That's kind of what it looked. But there were disputes about that, because people have been preserving by memory, and these early guys like Ibn Masud and Ubayn, that they moved to they're teaching in different areas, and they develop a following there. And then some guy comes along from a different city and says, hand your Qurans over, because here's the official one. It's like, well, who are you talking to? Who do you think you're talking to? You're talking to freaking Ibn Masud like this? And so they have these disputes, and it looks like Uthman's way just wins out, because he's the caliph and he can sort of crack down on all these guys, and they have to obey their leaders eventually, and so on. And so eventually you just get with the Uthmanic version and variations thereof. And so I mean, I don't have a terrible problem with all of that. I just have a problem with you looking at all this and saying, this is miraculous, perfect preservation. Like, this is what are you seeing here? Anyway.
Jean Rossi, mental hacker, said Andrew Tate disagrees with you guys. Andrew Tate, peace be upon him, disagrees with you guys.
He is the greatest. He's the greatest man ever, according to him.
Definitely. House of Hikmah said, cue the Yo Mama jokes with preservation of the Quran theme. Yo Mama, by the way, here.
He means like, your mama's so dumb, she thinks there's only one Quran. Oh!
Which is only in reference to the Battle of Yamama, in case anyone is wondering why we are suddenly talking about Yamama jokes. For added context here, Khalid said you should interview Ibn Warraq. I don't even know who that really is, and if he's really. Do you know that person? The guy.
I think Robert knows him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about him except that he had like early criticism of Islam and all that. Goan Stilpuan said Sunan. Oh yeah, I already saw that. Metagalaxy said, which was the main religion in Arab world before Islam and Christianity? Well, depends on which Arab world you are looking at. I always recommend this book, but it's Arabia and the Arabs by Robert Hoyland. But he describes that there was not one single Arab religion in pre-Islamic Arabia. Arabs far in the north, many of them were Christians. Arabs in Mecca and the environment were polytheists who adhered to their local gods. Those wider in the south adhered to different gods, also were polytheists. But primarily in the peninsula, it was spread throughout in the peninsula. It was Arab polytheism with some Christians under Christian influence, with some other minor groups like the Sabians are mentioned, which are a dubious group. Muslims sources mention a group named the Hanifs, which are also a dubious group. But there were several different groups, but the main primary one, the common one, the popular one, was Arab polytheism. And Apollo's Christian Apologetics said, Big Tech IBM internship guy preached Birmingham Quran proves Islam and disproves other religions. It's 3 chapters in vague Arabic. Before I can candidly clarify, he ends conversation with be professional.
That's completely stupid. The Birmingham Quran is like 2 pages.
Yeah.
And there are variants even on those 2 pages. And what in the name of common sense?
I think it is.
How would that prove Islam? Like, suppose the Birmingham manuscript were the entire Quran. Like, suppose you had an entire manuscript, and suppose it was pretty early, and suppose there was nothing that contradicted. How would that prove Islam? And how would it disprove any other religion?
I think it was pretty clear from the findings that this is not a usable Quran source or reference. It is merely it is just a small fraction of what the Quran may have looked like, just to confirm some of the authenticity and the age of the Quran, some of the consistency, and it says nothing about the rest of the Quran, nothing about whether its claims are true or not. So the whole argument is kind of dumb.
Muslims seem to be intent on refuting an argument that no one's making, right? It's like, we found 2 pages of a Quran from an early manuscript. Great, we've got some early manuscripts. What are you saying? Like, no one is saying Islam was invented 4 centuries later, and that therefore, if you've got an early manuscript, it refutes our objection. But the idea that this, again, you could have a copy of the Quran from the time of Muhammad. How does that refute any religion? How does that prove Islam is true? We don't understand that. That's what we're asking. Because keep in mind, if you're just saying, a book has been, we have copies of the Bible from before the time of Muhammad. So if you're just saying, hey, a manuscript has lasted a long time, well, great. We've got copies of the Bible that are older than that are before the time of Islam. So we've got copies of stuff. It's not a miracle that a copy of a book would be preserved for 1,400 years, 1,500 years, 1,600 years, 1,700 years. That's not miraculous. So what are you even talking about?
Exactly. I mean, if people said, if we concluded that that the Quran has been perfectly preserved from the very first form after the very first compilation, I would think, yeah, okay, nice, whatever. I guess that's cool, because Muslims cared so much about the Quran. But what does that exactly say about the contents of the Quran? I have an issue with what the Quran actually says and claims. Those things are more important to me than the technicals, than the preservation of the Quran, which is very very unimportant to me still after all these discussions. Let's continue with the video.
Could very well be a codex belonging to one of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And so we wouldn't know the date of the upper layer of the text so much, but we would know the date of the creation of the parchment. And we could assume that, parchments were expensive to produce, and a whole flock of animals had to be killed, perhaps a couple of hundred animals to make enough, to give you enough skin to write the Quran, because the text was written in large font in those days, and it took many skins to write the whole text. So you wouldn't just go to your local stationery store and buy from the stock of parchment that they had there. So people produced the parchment for the specific purpose of writing a document. So if we know when the animals died, we know basically when the document was first written. So that was within a couple of decades after the death of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Any issue with this? No.
No, he's actually, I mean, this is most of that's basic stuff, but yeah, it is difficult for people to understand today that writing and so on and coming up with books was a lot more difficult back then. Before you have paper and before you have printing and so on, you have few people who could write out a book, and writing materials, especially in the, you know, somewhere in Arabia, pretty difficult to come by. You need to slaughter a lot of animals. You before that, people would write on like papyrus and so on, and papyrus is easier and cheaper to make, but it doesn't last as long.
Mhm.
Parchment will last way longer than papyrus, unless you keep the papyrus completely dry, and that's why the only time you hear about papyrus fragments surviving is like in the middle of like a desert or something like that. Yeah, well, 5 hours for reads.
Wow.
He says download it before he deletes it.
Wow. 4 hours and 48 minutes. That's very nice.
Powerful.
Very, very nice.
Farid destroys Apostate Prophet and David Wood.
So probably in the time of Uthman, or close to his time, and definitely within the lifetime of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so that becomes a different witness, though with some variations, to what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be.
Very quick question to you. I don't have any comment on this at all, but since it came up here, I would like to ask what do you think about it? I personally have no big personal opinion on Shabir Ally. As far as I've seen him, he's a nice guy. He tries to represent things honestly and well. The one issue that I have with him is I did ask him for a debate once through James Modern Day Debate, and his response to my debate offer was that he does not want to debate. And you know why? Because he said he refuses to debate me because he will only debate Christians. And I'm not a Christian. And that, I think, speaks volumes. It just shows that he prefers to debate Christians because he knows that Christians are weak, because he knows that Christians don't have anything useful to say, because he can easily destroy Christians.
He's scared
on the other hand, he's scared of atheists. That's why he will not debate me.
He's scared of the power of your arguments.
Yeah.
You got such powerful arguments.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, he spent his kind of entire career looking for ways to debunk Christianity. As far as is he dishonest? I'll say Shabir seems to me, because I've had I think 9 debates with Shabir over the years. I think 9 debates over the years. We had 4 early on and then more later. But Shabir is obviously, and to his credit, massively more honest than your average Dawa guy, like, you know, Zakir Naik or something like that, right? Your average, and even someone like Yasser Qadi. Yasser Qadi used to just flat out lie. When he said no variance in any Quran from the time of Uthman, he knew that was a lie. He was telling it anyway. He's trying to calm Muslims down. Shabir has realized that, okay, this isn't going to work anymore. We can't just keep saying perfect preservation, because then we're going to be the obvious liars here and so on. So Shabir is telling the truth. So the question is he telling the truth because it's the truth and he respects the truth? Or is he just, does he see the writing on the wall and realize we can't keep up this myth of perfect preservation? There's too much evidence circulating on the internet. Again, Shabir to me seems far more honest than most da'is. I can't think of a time when I know he's lying. There are some, I have some concerns, like when he uses a theory about, when we debate and he defends a theory, I'm like, you have to know that's wrong. You have to, like, when he claims that Jesus was crucified, I don't have a problem with that from the Quran. You talked about this with Khalil and so on. But then he'll say, and there's a German scholar who suggests this, and this other guy is saying that Jesus' crucifixion isn't mentioned. I mean, Jesus' death by crucifixion isn't mentioned in Q and stuff. It's like, Q is a sayings document. It's a collection of sayings of Jesus. Why would you think that it records his death when it's a collection of saying? Well, it doesn't make any sense. It's like Shabir, I don't know. It's just, it's more of a bad vibe than catching him lying. It's like, Shabir, you're too smart to not see the holes in what you're saying. So I do have concerns like that, but I'll say I don't know. Maybe it's so desperate to cling to Islam that he's looking for a way, and this way makes sense to him. And so even though I'm looking at it going, there's no way you can actually take that seriously. You're too smart for that. You've read too much on this. But I don't know. I don't know psychologically what's going on. But I'll say at the very least, he's way more honest than almost any Dawa guy you'll ever run into.
Yep.
And even on this, Shabir speaks, and he knows he's going to get in trouble. He knows he's going to get a backlash. He knows he's going to get messages from tons and tons of Muslims saying, you're destroying our faith by admitting, or you're giving ammunition to the apostate prophet and David Wood by acknowledging these issues and so on. He knows he's getting into trouble. He's saying it anyway. So that's all to his credit.
You heard it. David Wood hates Shabir Ally. We got it here on record. Samantha said, I left Islam thanks to people like you guys. Thank you for being honest when our own Islamic leaders wouldn't. I appreciate that, and it makes me happy to hear that, Samantha, and thank you. By you guys, she means guys like me, not like you, David. Let's continue with the video.
Upon him preached. And so we have not only the Uthmanic manuscripts, but if scholars were wondering, and they have wondered, like, what else is there? Like, did something else get suppressed that we would like to know about?
Mhm.
Well, here, this comes, as a double-edged sword. On the one hand, this cuts away at the sense of complacency that many Muslims have gone around with, thinking that, okay, everything has been preserved dot for dot, letter for letter, the way it was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, with no variation or change whatsoever. So, that it cuts at that general sense, which actually is not a scholarly way of thinking.
Look, I mean, my goodness, we could watch that part like 100 times. Until
It's
Muslims
very
get
good that he said that.
Yeah. He's saying this, which I agree with him. This doesn't cut away this wouldn't cut against our belief that, we have basically what Muhammad said and so on. It does pose a problem for you if you believe this perfect preservation right down to the letter, which unfortunately is what your average Muslim believes. So he's saying, yeah, if you believe like I do, this isn't a problem. If you're a realist and you understand the history, this isn't a problem for you. But if you've bought into this myth, this delusion, this lie, yeah, this is a problem for you. Well, great. that's like well over 1 billion Muslims believe perfect preservation right down to the letter. And so interesting. But now he's going to go on to say this is not the standard Muslim position is not a scholarly position. Scholars know about the differences.
Oh, okay.
Watch
with no variation or change whatsoever. So, that it cuts at that general sense, which actually is not a scholarly way of thinking about the Quran. Our scholars have always known and have always described in our classical books variations and manuscripts, like, it's read like this by Ubay bin Ka'b, it's read like this by Ibn Masud, and so on.
Shouldn't it be read the exact same way by everyone? That's what Sneako thinks, Shabir. Is Shabir saying Sneako is wrong? You should just make videos like that. Shabir Ally destroys Sneako and just play a clip about him. Guys, hey, who's watching? Is House of Hikmah still around here? He puts these videos together. House of Hikmah is very simple. You take a clip of Sneako saying something, play a clip of Shabir Ally, and you title it Shabir Ally destroys Sneako. You do the same thing with Yasser Qadhi. Yasser Qadhi destroys Sneako. And that's how you make a YouTube video.
Also make another video saying Sneako destroys Muhammad, or Sneako says Muhammad is not perfect, and then take one clip where he says that nobody's perfect because he had a child.
Yeah, and you could always flip it. So Shabir Ally just said scholars know about this, but Sneako says it's not the case, and therefore Sneako destroys all Muslim scholars.
That's good. That is good.
So it was seen to be written like this in the Codex of Ibn Ubay bin Ka'b. It was seen to be written like this with this or that variation. So these were always known in scholarly circles to have existed. But recently, average Muslims have just simply without bothering to learn, they have just simply parroted a common way of speaking about Quran and saying, it's 100% the way it's always been.
This is so funny. Because this You hear this from every Muslim.
Yeah.
You hear this from every single Muslim that you encounter. I'm obviously I'm exaggerating, not from every single, but you hear this from basically every Muslim that you encounter in real life or online. This whole idea that the Quran has been 100% perfectly preserved from the very beginning to the end, word for word, letter for letter, dot for dot, and so on. But here he is, Shabir Ally, like many other scholars, saying this is not actually a real, original belief shared by those scholars who know, because they are aware that this is not true.
Yeah,
So this is not true. This is just something that people
and so notice it says this perfect preservation. One, he says it's recent. He says it's unscholarly, and it's only from people who don't learn. Like if your position is just invented recently, goes against all scholars, and is only held by people who don't know anything, you probably need a new position. But we say the exact same thing that Shabir says, and we're liars. You guys are lying.
So you're an Islamophobe.
What is this? Is amazing stuff, man. Someone could write an entire book on psychology just based on like this issue, people clinging to a myth of perfect preservation. Because notice this isn't like a matter of interpretation. Like even if you argue for scientific miracles in the Quran and you're saying a verse should be interpreted in this way, okay, I'm not going to agree with you. It's obviously not what's being said and so on. But this is just a different category. It's like there's this entire mountain of evidence which shows that what you're saying is completely false. Your own scholars will sit here and say, guys, this is not, scholars know that what you're saying is false. This is a recent development. It's a total myth. Only people who've never studied believe this, and people will still just believe it. It's amazing stuff, man.
Amazingly amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Diana just asked if this video by Shabir Ally is an old video because she has seen it 1 or 2 years ago. No, this one is actually from 11 months ago. He also has a video that is much older from 3 years ago about the Sinai manuscript, but this is not that one. This here is more details and longer than the older one, with more insight and more shocking revelations as you hear them right now. So yeah.
One quick thing. Bernadette says, David Wood, what sources would you recommend for someone discerning Christianity versus Islam? I mean, if you're talking about from a Christian perspective, Nabil's books, obviously. Answering Islam by Norm Geisler and Abdullah Salib. That was the first book I read on Islam, but that's a classic. I would recommend a website, the Answering Islam website. Now, there are a couple of Answering Islam websites, but I think answeringislam.net. There are a couple of variations that all link to the same site, but then there are some other sites, but I think it's answeringislam.net. Bunch of people there. That's for articles. Other than that, find videos you like from.
I think it's actually answeringislam.org.
Yeah, there are a couple of them that all go to the same one. What's answeringislam.net do?
I don't know.
Yeah, see, you don't know. See? Hang on.
Answeringislam.net.
Yeah, answeringislam.net works too. Yeah, there's several of them.
Wow. They got all those domains. Terrible.
Yeah, so I would recommend Bernadette learning topically. So pick a topic you're interested in, look up some articles or videos or books dealing with that topic and study that, because we've talked about this before. If people want to say, should I just read the Quran? You're going to give up. You're going to give up if you just read the Quran.
Yeah. I've just been, it just came to my attention that a fatwa has been declared on the like button. So please push the like button, wage jihad on the like button, hit the like button, / and destroy the like button while you're here to help this live stream become what it deserves to be. Yes. Okay. Now let's move on.
And they cannot imagine any variation. So in the one way, it cuts against that. But on the other hand, it removes that scholarly suspicion which was there. Like in academia, there was always a suspicion. You know what? We would really like to find a pre-Osmanic Quran. We would like to see what was there before Uthman suppressed it all and gave us the one copy which everybody has been.
That sounds so interesting, doesn't it? Before Uthman suppressed it all, what was there?
Yeah, so he's I guess what he's thinking of here is like, okay, Uthman actually like gathers all the Qurans and burns them all to cover up the differences. So the question is, from a scholarly perspective, I guess what he's saying is how different was that? Because they're obvious. If he's burning them all, there's obviously differences there. So I think he's how much of a difference was it? Is it like were they 99% similar? Or were they like 5% similar? Were these completely different Qurans or something like that? And he's saying there's a suspicion. I'm not aware of. I don't think there's too many scholars who think he's just like inventing a Quran and the Sanaa manuscript fixes everything. I think I mean, I agree with Shabir. I think that what you have is a pretty accurate reflection of what goes back to. I'm not certain of that. I lean towards that. I agree with the general timeline of the life of Muhammad and the general timeline of the Quran. There are people who disagree with me on this and are way more suspicious. People like Jay Smith and Robert Spencer and so on. But I think that what you have in the Quran is a pretty accurate reflection of what Muhammad delivered to his followers. So I would agree that what the Sanaa manuscript really does is it should completely obliterate the perfect preservation claim, which is the belief of the vast majority of Muslims. But you don't even need the Sanaa manuscript to do that. So many other things do the exact same thing. But yeah, it should be the final nail in the coffin. And yet here we are still defending the perfect preservation of the Quran thanks to Sneako.
Yeah.
Sneako!
Zericide said Shabir is less stupid, not more honest. I already caught him lying as a strategy in debate. He strategically lie, unlike the others. I don't know. It's your observation. I can personally not say anything about this.
Yeah. Notice here, because people have different criteria. Like if we say something, AP, you and I sometimes get things wrong. If we happen to get something wrong,
I never get anything wrong.
If we happen to get something wrong, just misspeak, or if we're just completely wrong, right? The claim will be, you see, they're lying. It's like, wait, to be lying, you need to be aware, like deliberately deceiving people. We know there are people like we know Muhammad Hijab and Ali Dawa and all these guys lie, and they know they're lying. Yasser Qadi, when he said perfect preservation, he lied and he knew he was intentionally deceiving people. So yeah, if you want to, I mean, Xerox side, yeah, if you actually catch Shabir lying, he's lying. You could post a video saying he's lying. So the question is whether he just said something that's definitely false and he's wrong, or if he's intentionally lying. If you actually catch him lying, you can make a video out of that and show it.
Yeah, you don't want to get things wrong out of ignorance, because that's just embarrassing. If you want to lie, you should lie. I lie.
Yeah, lie like a man. Lie like a man. Lie like
I lie all the time. Yeah.
That's why Shabir won't debate atheists. He knows you're liars. He knows Christians speak the truth.
Yeah. Jacob Garden said, how is it possible for someone who is young to the realm of apologetics, theology, philosophy to discuss with you? This question is for both you and David.
Jacob, you shouldn't be discussing. You should be reading and learning right now.
Wow, that was brutal. That was brutal, and this was just a ruthless remark.
That's step one.
Yeah.
Read, learn, and then after a while, then start. I mean, keep in mind, I'm not saying having discussions. I'm saying that shouldn't be the first step. There shouldn't be, hey, I need to be going out and having these discussions right now. It's, hey, if you're interested in apologetics, grab a couple of books, spend some time reading those.
Yeah.
Point is, that's how I did it. That's how Nabil did it. I saw you mentioned Nabil earlier and so on. That's how we all get started. We're having discussions along, but when we're actually learning apologetics or history or theology or anything like that, you're sitting down with some books at first. Yeah. That's a good way to start.
I didn't do any of that. I just
that's from the Downfall movie.
I saw that.
Das war ein Befehl.
Muslims, when they find out the Quran was the perfect preserve, das war ein Befehl. Yeah. That meme.
That's an order. That's a command or something. Right?
Yeah, that was an order.
Yeah.
That was an order. That was a command. That was an order. Grace said, do you think Muslim apologetics is going to get better the more practice they get with public discourse, or is it just unsalvageable? Richard Carrier, peace be upon him, said this is like Christians 100 years ago. 100 years ago is, I think, very an understatement. I think Muslim apologetics is very, very, very far behind. very far behind. And I'm not saying this out of respect to Christian apologetics or anything. I'm really just stating that people see that all the time, and people point this out. Christians pointed out, atheists pointed out, so many others pointed out that Islamic apologetics is just terrible, right? Comparing it with apologetics of different origins, comparing it with Christian apologetics or with atheist debates and all that, Islamic apologetics is very far behind, very bad, very poor, and that might come from different origins, from the fact that Islamic apologetics is inexperienced, from the fact that Islamic apologetics doesn't have a long history, thanks to its whole idea of not engaging with the others, but rather just fighting and sticking to your own truth and condemning the disbelievers. Maybe there may be a lot of different reasons to that, but whether it is ignorance, lack of experience, or whatever it is, Islamic apologetics is very far behind, and who knows what the future will bring.
Yeah, I mean, you have had lame, of course, you've had lame Christian arguments from time to time. I mean, if you look now, I mean,
they're all lame, yeah.
Christian apologetics 2,000 years ago was Jesus is prophesied and he rose from the dead, so believe in him. If you look at Christian apologetics, still using basically the same arguments. You have had flawed arguments over time, but it's not like, oh, we just invented these, we came out with these new arguments and so on. Islam, I don't know what you would actually argue, given that, I mean, the arguments that you go back to are things like Muhammad's in the Bible and things like that. And then more recently, the Quran's been perfectly preserved. The main problem with Islamic apologetics is that the da'is and apologists really seem to think that lying is perfectly acceptable. And there's this built-in tendency, which you can see goes back all the way to Uthman, at the very least. There's this built-in idea that it's better to cover up the truth in order to keep people's faith than to let people know the truth. Like, notice the basis for destroying all these different Qurans was people had different Qurans. People had different Qurans. And I'm sure Shabir would say, but they basically give the same points, the same doctrines and practice. I would agree. You're not getting a bunch of different doctrines and practices and so on from these other Qurans, but they weren't all the same. They weren't identical. So drop that belief. But notice Uthman said, no, we all need to be on the same page here. We all need to get on the same page. So I'm going to burn everything. I'm going to burn it all and make people believe in one. And the suggestion that was based on, people came to Uthman and said, if we don't do something about people using different Qurans in different areas, there's going to be all these disagreements between Muslims eventually. You need to do something. And so the idea was, it's better to cover up reality and issue out a comforting agreement, right? Like, hey, we all have the exact same thing. That's better than having the differences and having the variance and letting people come to an informed decision on their own. We've talked about this before, AP. You can open up any Bible, and I mean, unless it's a bare Bible with no notes of any kind, but if you have a Bible that has footnotes in it, they'll tell you about textual variants and so on. It's not a secret. They're not trying to hide. And so what you end up with in the two different mindsets is, in Christianity, you're saying, here's what the facts are. Here's our view. Here's how we think it confirms Christianity in this way. You make your informed decision, but there's the evidence. It's right there. In Islam, it's we'll just lie about this to cover it up and then tell people a lie in order to get them to convert. And you do win converts like that. You will win people like Sneako. You will convince people like Sneako, oh, there's only one Quran. There's never been any differences. You can dupe someone into believing that. Eventually the lie is exposed, as it's being exposed right now. So you kind of lose your credibility. But notice, I mean, you're talking about from the time of Uthman, it's cover up the evidence so that people think everything is fine. And I would say for Islamic apologetics to get better, you got to drop that. You got to say, okay, we're going to tell you exactly what our arguments are. We're not going to distort anything. We're not going to lie. And what you can come up with after that, I have no idea. But I don't. It's really bad the way things have been going.
The way things be going really bad, really bad. Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. Okay.
Running around with now. So now we have found it, and now the skeleton is out of the closet. We can see that it's not something to be feared. It's like a kid looking on.
I love that saying, skeleton out of the closet. It reminds me of my of all the bodies that I hide in my closets.
To the bed and realizing there's no monster there. So this Sana palimpsest in a unique way validates the Islamic tradition. It shows that we have not suppressed anything. Maybe this Sana palimpsest was compiled.
We literally burned all the copies, and this one only survived because instead of burning it, someone said, I can't just burn this great parchment here. I'll scrape it all off, and then I'll write the Uthmanic version on it. And so we only find out about it because instead of burning it, this guy decided to scrape it off and reuse it. And we haven't suppressed anything.
Didn't he just say moments ago that that it's helpful to find out what was there before Uthman suppressed things? Is that what he just said? Or
I think he was thinking from the scholarly perspective.
Okay,
the scholars want to look and say, well, what was it like before Uthman suppressed it? So I think what he's saying here is that Uthman didn't suppress. Thanks to the Sana manuscript, we know that Uthman didn't suppress it in a way that massively distorted Islamic doctrine and practice.
Alhamdulillah.
But I mean, as far as we didn't suppress it, what are you talking about? I mean, you've been suppressing this reality for almost 1,400 years trying to cover this up.
That makes sense.
Without the proper rigorous methods that were used by Zayd bin Thabit and the committee that worked with him, and the diligence that they could have exercised, because they had the state backing. They had the funding. Every scholar nowadays knows that you need funding.
Go back a little to what he said, the committee.
And the diligence that they could have exercised, because they had the state backing. They had the funding. Every scholar nowadays knows.
A little bit before that, he said...
maybe the Sana palimpsest was compiled by a companion without the proper rigorous methods that were used by Zayd bin Thabit and the committee that worked with him,
that's what
and the diligence that they could have exercised, because
the reason I brought that up is Sneako, when he's talking about the Council of Nicaea.
Oh God,
guys, ladies and gentlemen of the world, especially you Muslims who are watching,
I forgot about that.
As a rule, anyone who says Council of Nicaea and then starts talking about the suppressing books or canon of scripture, anyone who says Council of Nicaea was doctoring the Bible, you've just run into someone who has absolutely no clue what he's talking about. But Sneako, I guess he heard this from somewhere, that the Council of Nicaea, because it's a popular myth. Notice it, and that's the other problem with Islamic apologetics. It's always based on find a person who has no clue what anyone was. Shabir said that. He's saying, hey, this is what's spread around people who don't learn. Well, guess what? Saying, the Council of Nicaea, they took books out of the Bible. Okay, that's someone who has never studied the Council of Nicaea for 5 seconds. Even when Sneako, he's Googling it on screen live. And it says it right when he Googles it. It says there's no evidence that the Council of Nicaea had anything to do with suppressing books of the Bible and stuff like that.
Let me bring this up. This is actually very funny. I forgot that this happened, but let's look at that. Wait. Why is there no sound?
Because it's amateur hour.
Any of the basics of the Bible.
What's the chapter and verse of that?
Matt, verse 39.
What's the chapter?
I don't know. There's been so many different. There's so many different versions of the Bible, bro.
What other versions of the Bible are there? Sneako?
There's so many, bro.
Okay, tell me some.
Okay, let's look up versions of the Bible. We have the King James Version, the English Standard Version, the New American Standard, the New English Bible.
You know the funny thing about all those different versions, Sneako?
What?
They're all just different translations, buddy.
Yeah, guys, that's like me saying there's so many different versions of the Quran. There's the Yusuf Ali version, the Halali Khan version, the Pickthall version, the M.H. Shakir version, the Arbery version. A Muslim would go, those are translations, dude.
I don't want to make fun of people, but this guy he goes out here and he willingly engages in these conversations. And I mean, just look at his face after
They're
he's
all just different translations, buddy.
But
but let's come to the whole thing of the Council of Nicaea. That's actually very, very.
but it gets worse.
Most people haven't read the original version. Have you heard of the Council of Nicaea? There's been a lot of chapters that have been removed, and the Bible's been tampered and manipulated with a lot over the years. Well, they did remove the Council of Nicaea from the original Bible. A lot of people
removed
haven't
the
read that.
Council of
It was
Nicaea.
parts of the Bible.
Wow.
Council of Nicaea. What are you saying? There's a book called the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah,
There's not no book called the Council of Nicaea.
it's not a whole book.
Pause it. The Council of Nicaea to address the entire body of claiming the doctrine that Christ was not to. Hang on, I thought he had it on the screen. Yeah, go ahead and play it because he's searching.
It's gonna come out.
There's not no book called the Council of Nicaea.
It's not a whole book, but
It's not a whole book.
So, as you just heard, Sneako rejects the credibility of the Bible in favor of Islam because they removed the book of the Council of Nicaea from the Bible. Now, for anyone who knows literally anything about church history, they know that the Council of Nicaea is not a book, but instead it's a council. Now, ordinarily, it wouldn't be a big deal that he's ignorant on Christianity and Islam since he's a new convert, but that's not the point. The point is, this is a problem since the reasons that he converted are based on the ignorance of Islam and Christianity. So after taking a second to Google the Council of Nicaea, Sneako says this.
There's no book of.
Oh, do you see it right there on the screen?
Yeah.
there was a council called the Council of Nicaea that manipulated the original Bible.
So here
Look
it
on
is.
this is his Google search. There is no historical basis for the idea that Nicaea established the canon and created the Bible.
This is directly what his own Google search brings up, and he's saying the opposite here.
Yeah. Anyway, so the point there is he's one, he don't understand what the Council of Nicaea is. First, he thinks it's the book of the Bible that's been taken out of the Bible. And then he does a Google search and it refutes what he's saying. But then he says it anyway. But notice, here's the point. But he's saying, he goes on to say, but Islam doesn't have that. It's like, wait a minute. You have Uthman appoints what did Shabir call it? A committee of Zayd and a couple others. And the result of that committee and issuing an authoritative Quran is to impose that Quran and burn everything else. I don't know about you, but I would be way more suspicious about that than, the Council of Nicaea. But notice, here's the thing, because AP, this is amazing to me. They'll say you can't trust the Bible because the Council of Nicaea was taken out of it. Or if you have any clue what you're talking about beyond, if you at least know that it's a council and not a book, you can still make something up. But notice we'll make something up about the idea that the books of the Bible were selected at the Council of Nicaea. We'll make that up. That's just a lie. But we'll make that up. But then we'll say, because Christianity has that, you can't trust the Bible. So you can only trust the Quran because we don't have anything like that. When in reality, the Council of Nicaea had nothing to do with selecting books of the Bible. But in Islam, they actually burned everything and imposed by power of the government a Quran on everyone. And we're not supposed to be even slightly suspicious about that. Notice, Sneako has no idea about any of this. And this is what he's saying is the basis of his confidence in Islam is. This is insane. This is insane.
What's funny is Sneako claims that he thought about things very deeply, and he was raised Catholic, and he believed in God and stuff like that. And anyone who was raised Catholic and who actually learned anything about his religion will know that the Council of Nicaea is not a book that was in the Bible. And that was at some point removed in order to corrupt the Bible. And this is just unbelievably stupid. This is unbelievably stupid. And I get it. Lots of people out there are not meant to be, mildly informed about their religion. Lots of people out there are ignorant of basics. It's all right. But hey, this guy is not just some random dude who shows up and answers our questions. No, this guy is somebody who actually is out there and converts to Islam with the guidance of Muslim apologists and Muslim preachers. And he is then praised and pushed as somebody who is, who is good and informed and smart, and he makes the wise decision to convert to Islam as a result of his deep thinking. Whereas people who leave Islam and actually learn Islam and actually learn about different religions and then criticize these religions, critically analyze things, are dismissed as ignorant simply because they oppose Islam. This is the kind of stuff that Islam relies upon. It's just so incredibly dumb. But yeah, no, back to the Islam issue, of course. There you have it. You have no historical evidence to suggest that there was actually a corruption at the Council of Nicaea, whereas you do have a complete lack, a complete absence of any professional coming together and creating an authentic Quran. But you indeed do have authorities come and pick and choose the Quran and prefer one style while suppressing the others. Whether the meaning is in the end the same or not is entirely irrelevant. It is the fact that authorities are in charge of picking and choosing and imposing and preserving their Quran. That is the point. That makes the entire claim that the Quran has been perfectly preserved invalid. It makes it dubious. It makes it a strange choice to believe in Islam and its message of perfect preservation. And with that said, we actually have a few more minutes here.
State backing. They had the funding. Every scholar nowadays knows that you need funding to carry out your research. And scholars are human beings. They cannot work without some scholarly without some financial support. So Zaid and his team had the support of the ruling caliph, and they could do it in a very systematic and rigorous manner. But
for those who are still talking about the Council of Nicaea, the point the point of the Council of Nicaea was to address the heresy of Arianism, which was going around, and to come to a conclusion, a consensus on true Christian doctrine and the nature of Jesus.
Yeah, we should actually get a historian, just because there's so many delusions about this. Guys, basically, for the first few centuries of Christianity, it's a persecuted sect. You couldn't get together for a council, right? So you had Christians over here, Christians over there, Christians over here, Christians over there. All of a sudden, it becomes a legal religion in the Roman Empire, and you get Constantine saying, "Hey, you guys can get together for a council." And so Christians from different parts of the area get together to discuss their disagreements. And it's on. I mean, it wasn't just that. They discussed a bunch of issues. Like one of the issues at the council was, what about people who, while being tortured, renounced Christ? In other words, you're being tortured and renounced Christ. Are you okay? Are you okay to come back? Are you okay to be a leader after that? Like after you've come back from renouncing Christ, or are you just done? So they're discussing issues like that because you didn't have a council. You couldn't have a bunch of Christians all getting together and so on. And so they have a council. They discuss some issues, but it's just weird to say, oh, and they did all these things that they didn't do. We know what happened to the Council of Nicaea. You can look it up. You can Google search it. You can Wikipedia it. You can do any level of research. You can read entire books on it. But we know what happened at the Council of Nicaea, and what Muslims say happened there are the things that never happened there. And so the question is, like, why is it okay to just constantly make stuff up? It's weird.
Because that's how we roll.
Individuals left to their own, might be doing it well one day and the other day not so well. So we have in something like this palimpsest, probably that mixture of good and not so good scholarly work in producing that.
I think, is there anything else that you want to address in this video? I think we were pretty much done. Right?
No, I think if I recall correctly, his conclusion is, so we can trust the Quran, and I'm not too far apart with Shabir on this. I think that the Sana'a manuscript, since it's early, shows that yes, the Quran was not something that was invented centuries after Islam or something like that. But I mean, my goodness, what else do you need if you're still clinging to this myth of perfect preservation and the only one Quran since the time of Muhammad? Like what level of delusion do you have?
Well, it was perfectly preserved, each version, since it was printed at whatever printer you have today.
Mhm.
possibly. I don't know. So that's at least that's a good point. Yeah. But yeah, no, the whole myth, the whole idea of the perfectly preserved Quran has hereby been destroyed. And the Islamic scholar Shabir Ally has explained to us that this whole idea, parroted by Muslims, and he used those words, parroted by Muslims, is unscholarly. It is not factual. It is based on a myth. And the scholarly opinion is quite clear on this, that there have been variations and differences, different codexes, manuscripts, different lengths of the Quran, and this should be known. So the whole idea of perfect preservation, word for word, letter for letter, dot for dot, is not accurate.
Yeah, and so if you want to understand, if you want to put it all together, all the recent developments, as Shabir pointed out, Muslim scholars have always known this, have always known about these disagreements in these different Qurans and textual variants and the different versions of the Quran that exist today. Recently, you're talking in the past few decades, it became a very popular just lie to say perfect preservation right down to the letter as a miracle of Islam. And thanks to the power of the internet, people started exposing that, showing from the Muslim sources that entire chapters were lost, large passages were lost, verses were eaten by a sheep, things like that. And then more recently, Hatun shows up to Speaker's Corner with a couple of dozen different Arabic versions of the Quran. These are not different translation. These are different Arabic versions. In other words, you could pick any two of those Qurans, line them up, and you can find differences between any two of those Qurans. So those were all different Arabic Qurans. And Muslim scholars have always known about those things, but it completely destroys the myth of perfect preservation. For Muslims who are kind of in the middle and they're trying to reconcile this with some sort of divine inspiration, some sort of divine preservation, they came up with explanations where, whenever something comes up missing, it's been abrogated. Whenever you have variants, it's because Allah revealed them in multiple ways and so on. So they came up with things like that. And so here, the background is, once you've told the population perfect preservation right down to the letter, and then people start going to their scholars, start finding out, wait a minute, what about these two different, what about this difference in between Hafs and Warsh? What about this? And they go back to their scholars and da'is and apologists and say, you said perfect preservation, no variance. What is this right here? And they would explain the differences in terms of, the ahruf and kirat and things like that. And so the slightly more knowledgeable Muslims, the Muslims who at least knew about the variants, but weren't sure what the explanation for this was, they would go to their scholars who would tell them, we can account for that with the kirat and the ahruf and all the, Allah revealed it in a bunch of different ways and things and that. And then they would say, okay, that explains the variants and so on. And then what happened was Muhammad Hijab called out Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, who was giving completely different explanations to different people. To one group, he was saying perfect preservation right down to the letter. To students of knowledge, he's saying, of course, we have different Qurans in different parts of the world with variants and so on. And so he's called out to explain how he can believe in, perfect Quran and so on, and yet these variants and so on, which there is no explanation. He was just lying. There is no real explanation. He was just lying. But Muhammad Hijab really seemed to think that, I can explain this in terms of kirat and ahruf and so on. And Yasir Qadhi's, at the end of the day, Yasir Qadhi's response was, there are holes in the narrative. And there he was specifically responding to, we've got a narrative, there's a narrative that we can account for these variants in terms of kirat and ahruf. And he's saying they don't work. The explanations don't work. Some of the explanations are better than others. And he said, I'm working on one, but the explanations that are on the table right now just don't really work.
I think precise words were, the standard narrative has holes in it. Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say. And apart from that, it was, shut up about this. And so he was telling Muhammad Hijab, you're going to destroy people's faith in the Quran, which again assumes that people's confidence in the Quran is based on a lie. It's based on deception. He's assuming that. And so you have these different levels. You've got basically Shabir right now and the people like him who are saying we need to be honest about this because we can't keep lying about this stuff. So you've got that, and then you've got Yasser Qadi, who says, yes, we'll discuss this amongst ourselves, the knowledgeable Muslims. We'll discuss this amongst ourselves. Keep this, don't talk about this to your average Muslim or around non-believers. It will destroy people's confidence in the Quran. Why? Because they'll find out we don't know what we're talking about and we have no real explanation for this. And then you've got the level of the popular da'is who, until very recently, were still using perfect preservation of the Quran as a miracle. Now they're starting to shut up about this, but they still say it to people like Sneako. When they find someone who's completely ignorant and knows nothing, they'll still feed people like him a bunch of nonsense on the side. They don't tend to say perfect preservation anymore publicly because they know it'll be destroyed and they'll be exposed as liars. And so but they're still pushing this. And so so take your pick. You can go with Shabir Ally being honest about the history of the Quran, or Yasser Qadi being two-faced about it, or being completely delusional and lying, or lying. You could be completely delusional like Sneako and think you know what you're talking about when you don't, or you can lie about it, or you can be two-faced, or you can be honest. Take your pick. But it's not looking good for the myth of perfect preservation right now.
Stop dissing Sneako, man. The guy's
Sneako!
Big intellectual, and I don't think you want to start a beef with somebody who could
No,
intellectually humiliate you.
The sad part, AP, is tomorrow we're having a live stream on my channel with you, me, and John McCrae, and we're gonna actually go through. I haven't watched it yet, but we're gonna go through Sneako's response to John McCrae. I heard that he played it during a live stream on Rumble. So we're actually going to go through his response, and maybe he'll change our minds and we'll realize, nope, Sneako is the intellectual powerhouse he thinks he is.
I think it's pretty clear that he actually is. He's intellectually superior to all of us, and we just don't know it. That is definitely what we are going to find out tomorrow. And so with that said, here are a few more super chats that I quickly want to address. Bubakar Colley said, AP, why don't you visit Sheikh Uthman at San Diego Balboa Park? You are scared of him.
Is he joking? You can't even find him anymore. Like most of the people who go to find, he shows up like sporadically now, because
Really?
like you have people like you have people who go there and they can't find him and so on. So
Well, I'm scared of him. That's why I don't go there.
well, he's like, I can't tell if people are joking. It's like, wait, Sheikh Ibn Ketchup, the guy who faked a hate crime against himself and blamed us for it, the guy they call Sheikh Ibn Fibbin, the guy they call Sheikh Ibn Footnote for lying and saying that a footnote was actually a hadith. Like David,
I'm scared of the guy. I'm
terrified.
I'm scared. So I'm just,
he's really the perfect example of what we've been talking about. That it really, I'm saying this is just the way it really seems like da'is, the dawah guys, believe that it's perfectly acceptable to lie to people as long as it convinces them to convert to Islam. Notice there's a parallel, right? Like Daniel Hakikatu and so on. They believe it's mass murdering people is perfectly acceptable as long as it's for the good of Islam. So they believe that like doing really messed up things are perfectly acceptable. Because in their mindset, it's like, okay, if I can lie to you, but you're going to become a Muslim and escape from hell, isn't that better than telling you the truth and you don't believe?
Yeah.
And then you go to hell? Like, isn't it better to lie to you than to tell you the truth? And so, but I mean, you can see it with Sheikh Uthman, Ali Dawah, Muhammad Hijab. You can see it. These guys just feel completely free to lie to people. And and when you do that, no problem. You get Sheikh Ibn Ketchup, and you get a bunch of people rallying around him thinking he's their hero when he's the biggest liar there is.
And that is good. Like, lying is actually how you make powerful arguments.
Lying is halal.
Alfredo Waters said, "Tell David Wood to say I'm sorry, Sanana Banana." What does that mean?
I don't know. I'm sorry, Sanana Banana.
I don't know. Xeric Side said, was saying this about Shabir because he used arguments that he recognized himself were invalid against a Christian that believed they were true.
Wait a second. So I think there's a guy who said that Shabir was caught lying. So was saying this about Shabir because he used arguments that he himself recognized were invalid against a Christian that believed they were true. So I guess he's saying that Shabir, I don't know, is he saying like, okay, well, from your perspective, things you believe, they refute you. But he himself doesn't believe that. I don't know if I conclude that line, because you can say, hey, from your perspective, you've got a problem here because of this and this and that. So yeah, I don't.
I can't catch up with the content.
We'd have to see more context before.
I'll
The point is we're kind of careful about calling someone a liar. We could say someone's wrong, we'll say someone's stupid and so on. But if we're going to say lying, we normally want to see some evidence.
Also said, hey, P, can you please say Sanana Banana, you suck at defending Islam, you get What is this, man? What is going on here? I don't know.
I think he wants a recording of you saying that for some reason.
I'm not going to read the rest of it. Xerox side said, David, I will do videos because of all the BS. What? Because of all the BS said about Christianity online nowadays, not only by Muslims but Christians also. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. And tear baby. What?
Okay.
I don't know what's going on anymore. But
I don't know anymore.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah. Okay. With that said, I think we are pretty much done here. I want to say. Oh, I changed our backgrounds here to make it look nicer here.
Powerful.
Wait, background is actually, what is this?
That's Osama, your hero.
Oh yeah, that's actually not Osama Bin Laden. That's actually something more interesting than Osama Bin Laden.
Osama Bin Laden. They should have called him Osama Bin Hayden. Oh, it's Fareed.
This was back then when I had my back and forth with this guy. Powerful stuff. But I only made this as a response to them making a mockery thumbnail of me, comparing me to Kim Jong-un, which doesn't even make sense. I still don't get it.
Don't make sense at all. Oh, but by the way, but earlier on, since Fareed was still live back then, and maybe he's tuning in now, as we mentioned earlier, Fareed, get Sajid, join us live for a discussion. You don't have to talk about us over there. Notice, we'll keep talking about you and your dumb arguments and so on, but we're the ones who are actually willing for you to join us live. So if you were to respond, you'd say, oh no, I don't want to give these guys a platform. It's our platform. We're inviting you to our platform. We're inviting you to share your arguments on our platforms. So you can expose us on our own platforms. We're inviting you guys. And we'll invite tomorrow as well, but Sneako, if you want to join us for a friendly discussion, we know you're new, so you are welcome to bring someone with you. Your pick, any great Muslim scholar, da'i, whoever. You want to come on? We'll have a friendly discussion.
Yeah, possible.
Get Shake Ibn Ketchup with you. You like him?
Good idea. I completely agree with all of that. But I'm pretty sure Fareed will not agree. Fareed will say, I don't have time for you. I don't.
Yes, Sneako would agree before Fareed would.
I'm not going to give you attention. Although his stream was like, his stream had like a peak viewer count, 200 people or so. So come here.
Isn't that funny, by the way?
People will watch it. You can correct us in front of so many people.
Wait, isn't that funny, by the way? It's like, I'm not going to share a platform with you guys, but I'll sit here and play your entire live stream on my channel. Wait, so you have no problem with us talking 2 weeks ago, but and then playing that? Like there's a time lag, right? Like, I can't talk to you live, but I can talk to you from 2 weeks ago.
That's good. But by the way, the live stream he actually played the live stream, which included parts of where we say some pretty rough things about Muhammad in response to somebody insulting us, or I don't know, where I rip up the Quran in response to somebody insulting your son, for example, which is like, I don't know, he exposes his audience to these things. So maybe you should just come on our channel where we will have a respectful, nice discussion with him, and he can show everyone, our viewers foremost,
it's
we are completely wrong.
So easy to present
of a prophet,
their movement and what they represent. Yeah, well, let's carry on.
This is.
We are happy to insult your fake child molesting, murdering rapists.
It's all your fault. He played stuff like this on his own channel to his own audience. Like,
Wow. But so he played that on his own channel, but he won't have a discussion where we wouldn't be insulting. As long as they're not insulting, we don't insult, right?
I wouldn't say any of these things to him. I would have a very friendly, a very normal, a very peaceful discussion with him if he did indeed agree to having a discussion with me or with us. This is just something that we do in response to somebody becoming, acting like a complete jerk, which is understandable. Yeah.
With that said, I believe we are having a discussion, I think on Tuesday. We still need confirmation from everybody, but I think it's going to be on your channel, you, me, Cameron from Capturing Christianity, and Khalil, so Muslim scholar, is going to be on with us, and we're going to be discussing Cameron's recent tweet where he suggested that Christians and Muslims should unite against atheists. So we're gonna it's gonna be me, Khalil, and Cameron's all ganged up, crushing the apostate prophet, embarrassing him on his own channel. Notice, we'll all come on Apostate Prophet's channel to destroy him, but Fareed and Sajid won't come on to destroy us.
Yeah, that will happen soon. This is a tweet made by Cameron, Capturing Christianity, who is a nice guy. He said, by the way, Christians and Muslims should work together to combat atheism. And yeah.
Look at McRae's response. No one even cares about atheism.
No,
atheism is dead, Cameron.
No, I like that he put it here. Like it's atheists don't have nearly as many people who think that Christians should be killed for their beliefs.
Super L take, my dude.
Yeah. The only thing I did was just to say, I hope you're joking, and just posted certain verses where the Quran talks about Christians. I feel like he just got this wrong impression about Islam, this wonderful, sweet, peaceful impression from Dr. Khalil Andani, with whom he had a conversation, and then he thought, "Oh, we should all come together." But
there are a couple things like that. I mean, if you're having friendly interactions with Muslims and you're interacting with hostile atheists, you might think, "Oh, okay, well, I'm on the same page with the Muslims here," and there are friendly Muslims, but yeah, and also I think what he's thinking is like atheism is increasing in recent years, so like we need to nip this in the bud while it's taking off or something like that. I'm guessing, but I mean he can explain himself. He can explain exactly what he's thinking, and then we'll all destroy, and then we'll all gang up on the apostate prophet and expose him as a charlatan.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be one against many, and this will just prove that I am right by Islamic logic, because they say everybody is attacking Islam, and that shows that Islam is true. So if everybody is attacking me on my stream, that means I am right. But hey, this was actually the part that was
so Leo. Notice they're all calling Muhammad names now because of this guy.
Yeah.
Hey, Dawood, Muhammad's a child molesting, murdering rapist. Your prophet, you worship a child molesting, murdering rapist. We weren't going to do this. We weren't doing. We're going to respond to arguments. You want to start with insults, right? That's fine.
Look at Fareed's face.
Hey, I have to wonder, Fareed, why are you playing that stuff on your channel? Are you wrong? I mean, at least on our channel, it's on the channel of a bunch of, the kuffar, right? But you're posting this stuff on your channel. Fareed just posted. He posted. These are the most sensitive guys in the world, and he's reposting our stuff for us to show his Muslim viewers. Well,
it's crazy, man. Yeah, he's so mad. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff that he showed to his own audience, which is very, very, very surprising to me.
Wow, I can't believe it, man.
Finally, I am Chuslam said, I became ex-Muslim because of you. You snatched Jannah and 72 huris from me. David Wood. This is for you, David. Oh, and thank you for the super chat. Hey, I appreciate it.
No, I don't get to spend eternity deflowering virgins.
Oh no, what am I going to do now? Yeah, but everyone be like this guy and make big super chats to this channel so that this channel can become huge. Becoming the best.
Huge.
become the best channel out there.
Hey, it's getting. I mean, you're at almost 400,000 subscribers. That's massive.
Yeah, it's massive. Jungle is massive. Okay. Anything else you want to say? One sentence, one word.
Yeah. Be like Sneako, everyone.
I would say be like this guy who just made a super chat.
Stay away from the Council of Nicaea,
which is a book,
especially when it was removed from the Bible.
That's so stupid. That is so stupid. Come on, Mr. Bombastic. Oh yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a fantastic day. We will see you again tomorrow. We will be live on David Wood's channel, and on Tuesday we will be live on this channel with Capturing Christianity and Dr. Khalil Adani. And later in the week, I will probably be live with Michael Jones, Inspiring Philosophy, here on this channel to talk about the amazing truth that giants existed in the past as the Quran, as Islam describes them, but unfortunately the scientists, because they are so evil, suppressed this truth. And we will talk about that insanity from an Islamic perspective and criticize that. I think David should join too. That'll be hilarious.
Baby, fantastic.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and stay away from Islam.
Be a lover.
Wait.
Stay away from Islam.
You heard it.
Indeed.